Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. You're not battling aliens, surviving a medieval siege, or escaping a haunted amusement park. Nope. Tonight, you're waking up as a Victorian spinster, unmarried, underappreciated, and almost definitely freezing to death in your own bed. And just a heads up, you probably won't survive this. Not because of pirates or werewolves or anything exciting like that, but because your kidneys will eventually give out from all the corset compression. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments what time it is where you're watching this, and what city you're tuning in from. Always fun to see if anyone else is up past midnight questioning their life choices. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in a bed the size of a canoe. Heavy curtains, damp with dew, hang from its canopy like the mourning veil of some gothic widow. The air is so cold your breath fogs before your eyes. Your nose has officially left the building, numbed to oblivion by the frosty morning air, and your feet, your poor feet, feel like two raw potatoes in a foot warmer that has, at some point during the night, failed you entirely. Instinctively you roll over, hoping to grab your phone and check the time. But there is no phone, just a flint matchbox, a porcelain water pitcher, and, oh yes, the ceramic horror show that is your chamber pot sitting smugly under the bed like it's waiting for applause. Welcome to the 1800s. A shrill knock startles you out of your frozen stupor. A voice, prim and practical, slices through the door. Miss, it's 7:30. Your bathwater is cooling bathwater. You're lucky to be alive. You stagger upright, disoriented by the lack of LED screens and electrical outlets. The floorboards groan under your bare feet, which is exactly what your joints are doing too. You shuffle across the room, opening a wardrobe the size of a compact car. Inside are rows of grim, scratchy dresses that look like they've been dyed using sorrow and soot. You pull one out and realise it weighs as much as a large dog. Still, there's something oddly satisfying about the smell, like dried lavender and mothballs with a hint of generational trauma. You catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror, pale, unpowdered, uncoiffed, and utterly baffled. A lace nightcap is perched on your head like a surrender flag. Your hair is braided with the kind of precision that only Victorian maids, or extremely patient aunts, could muster. Your eyes are yours, but everything else has been rewritten by the strange rules of this new, corset-bound universe. And speaking of corsets, you spot it, lying there like a coiled python on the dressing stool. It looks harmless at first until you remember this is less lingerie and more torso jail. The maid, whose name you don't yet know but who clearly knows you far too well, enters the room holding a small towel and an even smaller sense of humour. You mustn't let your tea get cold, she says, entirely unbothered by your existential crisis. You sip the lukewarm liquid she set beside the mirror. It tastes like regret and boiled leaves, but it does warm your insides, which is helpful because your outsides are slowly turning to stone. As you sit, she begins dressing you, yes, dressing you, layer by layer. First, a chemise, then a pair of bloomers that make your modern sweatpants look positively scandalous. After that, the corset. She laces you into it like she's securing rigging on a Victorian warship. You can't inhale fully, your ribs are under siege. Your spine, it's filing a formal complaint, and yet this is just normal. Now come petticoats, and more petticoats. So many petticoats. You're a walking layer cake of linen and lace, and you haven't even gotten to the actual dress yet. When it finally goes on, buttoned all the way to your chin and somehow cinched at the waist despite your lungs' protests, you look like a respectable woman of independent means, or a hostage. Your boots have buttons, tiny, infuriating buttons. The maid does them up with the quiet confidence of someone who has done this 1,000 times. Meanwhile, you're still wondering how to walk in these things without twisting an ankle. By the time you're fully dressed, your tea is ice cold again. Your stomach is growling, and you're beginning to understand that your current existence has one purpose, not causing scandal. And somehow, you already feel like you've failed. You head downstairs to a breakfast room lit by natural light and parental disappointment. A long table stretches before you, covered in dishes you're not sure you're allowed to touch. Toast, eggs, kippers, marmalade, and something that looks like regret spread on a plate. You sit at your assigned spot, back straight, ankles crossed, hands folded. The silence is thicker than clotted cream. Your mother, or the woman now claiming that title, eyes you over her teacup. "You slept in," she says coolly. You did not. You were up with the frostbite fairies, but arguing seems pointless. You'll want to be ready when the Evertons call this afternoon. You blink. The who? A frown. Don't be foolish, dear. The Evertons, with the younger son. Ah, of course, the ever-reliable younger son. Too awkward for the military, too odd for the clergy, and too broke to inherit anything. But perfect for a woman of your age and station, which is to say, unmarried and running out of time. Historical fact for today. In Victorian England, spinster was not just a marital status, it was a class identity. Once you hit about 25 without a ring on your finger, society quietly pushed you into the corner like unused furniture. Fringe fact. Chamber pots weren't just for night use. Some women had dainty slipper pots they used discreetly during long social calls. Imagine trying to pee under your dress in someone else's parlour while pretending to enjoy cucumber sandwiches. And the scholarly debate? Historians still argue over whether Victorian spinsters were tragic victims of a rigid marriage market, or quietly radical women rejecting the whole game. The truth, as usual, probably lives somewhere between. Back upstairs, you lean against your bedroom door and exhale. Well, you try. The corset doesn't allow much exhaling. Today's just begun, and already you're exhausted. The maid returns to check your hemline. She gives you a knowing look. Try not to look so desperate, she advises, smoothing out the wrinkles. Even desperation is a luxury. The corset is winning. It's not even lunchtime, and your organs are staging a mutiny. As you shuffle back toward the dressing mirror to confirm that yes, you're still trussed up like a Victorian roast, you realise you don't even know how to sit down without sounding like a dying accordion. There's no way to relax in this thing. Every breath is a calculated risk. Every step is an etiquette test you're pretty sure you're failing. The maid has vanished, but her presence lingers in the air like starch and judgment. You eye yourself in the mirror. Someone has done impressive work with your hair, tight braids pinned into a halo around your head, no loose strands, no personality. Your dress is a sturdy brown wool, high-necked and buttoned so tightly your clavicles feel like they're being held hostage. The corset peeks through at the collar, a whisper of lace saying, "You'll never take a full breath again." You try to walk across the room and immediately feel the sway of the petticoats, like someone tied throw pillows around your legs. Sitting requires choreography. Perch on the edge, spine rigid, ankles delicately tucked. One wrong move and you'll either snap your stays or offend someone's delicate sensibilities. Or both. Downstairs, your mother is directing the servants with the soft menace of a woman who could ruin your social prospects with a single raised eyebrow. "The Evertons will arrive at 3, she says as you hover in the doorway, trying to look both invisible and valuable. You'll need your second best dress and those gloves without the wine stain. You wonder if maybe you should say something, ask about your life, your friends, your job if you had one. But apparently Victorian spinsters don't speak unless addressed directly. Instead, you nod. Your role today is clear. Be charming, but not clever. Pretty, but not vain. Mysteriously available, but not thirsty. Back upstairs, the maid returns with what looks like a punishment dress. Navy blue, starched to a crisp, with a lace collar sharp enough to cut someone. She lays it out like a shroud. You sigh and lift your arms. "Raise your elbows, miss," she says, tugging at the back. "You'll want to impress Mr. Everton." The way she says it, like you're about to sell your soul to a slightly mouldy baked good, makes your stomach twist. Once dressed, you're deposited in the sitting room like a fragile ornament, placed carefully near a window for optimal lighting. Your hands are folded, your feet are hidden. You're to wait here, quietly, until the Evertons arrive. That could be 10 minutes, it could be an hour. No one tells the spinster anything. As you sit, motionless except for the occasional restrained sigh, you begin to understand the full horror of Victorian fashion. It's not just the corset, although that's a war crime in itself. It's the sleeves, the stiffness of the bodice, the weight of the underskirts pulling on your hips. Even the gloves feel like you're being lightly embalmed. Everything is designed to keep you still, quiet, composed. You're a very stylish prisoner in a very genteel jail. The clock ticks in excruciating increments. You can hear it echo through the house, each second a reminder that time here is both precious and intolerable. Somewhere in the kitchen, a servant drops a spoon. The silence that follows is immediate and immense. Finally, wheels crunch on the gravel outside. A carriage. Your heart leaps, though you're not sure why. Hope? Dread? Gas, probably. There's been nothing but toast and boiled tea in your system for hours. Your mother appears in the doorway like a ghost summoned by etiquette. "Smile, dear," she murmurs, "but not too much." And then they're in the room. Mr. Everton the elder is polite, rotund, and smells faintly of brandy and self-satisfaction. His son, presumably the prize being dangled before you, is tallish, pale, and slightly damp-looking, as though he's been caught in a drizzle of sherry and disapproval. His hair is parted with surgical precision. His eyes flick to yours and then quickly away, as if the sight of a woman not yet married to him is simply too much. You stand to greet them, balancing delicately on your two small boots. A slight curtsy, a murmured pleasantry. The younger Mr. Everton offers you a nod that might be a smile if you squint and lower your standards. Polite conversation begins. It is not a thrilling affair. "What are your hobbies?" he asks, eyes fixed somewhere near your shoulder. You're tempted to say, tolerating oppressive patriarchy, but instead you answer, needlework and reading, which is apparently both acceptable and deeply uninspiring. "Ah, yes, reading is pleasant." He offers a tight-lipped smile, the kind a man gives when he's just remembered he left his dog outside during a storm. Tea is served, and you manage to pour without incident. You hand him a cup, and he takes it like you're passing a live bird. His mother watches with hawk-like intensity. No one breathes. You sip your own tea, which has cooled again, of course. Everything in this house cools before it reaches your lips. After a while, an eternity really, the Evertons rise. "We mustn't stay too long," Mrs. Everton says, dabbing her mouth with a handkerchief that cost more than your entire dress. "So lovely to see you again, my dear." Again? Apparently you've met them before. Of course you have. You've probably shared tea 5 times already, and you're still not married. Scandalous. They leave. The clock resumes its clicking. You're left standing in the parlour, spine aching, hands trembling from holding the teapot too long. Your mother appears again. "That went well," she says, though her voice is flat. "We'll see if he calls again." Spoiler alert, he probably won't. Historical fact. Victorian courtship was a slow-motion hostage negotiation. Men called on women under the supervision of chaperones, leaving their cards behind as proof of interest. Romance was optional. Reputation was everything. Fringe fact. Some young women collected these calling cards like Pokemon, engraved, scented, and sometimes even with tiny origami folds. A subtle way of flexing your popularity. And the debate? Historians still argue whether these strict social rituals empowered women with covert control or simply boxed them into smaller, prettier prisons. Both sides have a point. You certainly don't feel powerful right now. You return to your room, the corset still biting into your ribs, your stockings sagging slightly, your dignity intact but flickering. You sit again, carefully, always carefully, and stare at your reflection. A woman, unmarried, waiting, hoping, and somehow still expected to smile about it. The tea has settled somewhere between your sternum and your spine, and you're starting to wonder if the corset has compressed your internal organs into a sort of historical smoothie. You lie back on the chaise lounge in your bedroom, staring at the plaster ceiling with its intricate crumbling swirls, and for a moment you consider just staying here forever. But no, that would be too easy, and spinsters aren't allowed to loaf about. There are rules. There are always rules. Eventually someone knocks. It's the maid again, whose name you now know is Mary, because she muttered it under her breath in a tone suggesting she's been here longer than any of the wallpaper, and has even less patience. "You're expected downstairs for the afternoon," she says. "Guests." Her lip curls slightly. You try to read into it. Are the guests loathsome, judgy, possibly undead? You ask no questions. You nod and rise. Downstairs again, the drawing room has been transformed into what can only be described as a genteel social gauntlet. The tea service has been replaced. Fresh cakes have been laid out like sacrificial offerings, and there's a scent of something floral, violets or maybe disappointment. 3 ladies are seated in silence around the room, not friends. Oh no, not here. These are other women of your station, competitors in a sense. Though the prizes are unclear and the games deeply rigged, you greet them one by one. Miss Thistlewhite, who blinks too slowly and wears enough perfume to stun a horse. Miss Eliza Hartnell, who once danced with a Viscount and won't stop mentioning it, and Miss Poppy Gray, whose expression is so serene you suspect she may be asleep with her eyes open. They all nod at you like you're a polite blemish in their afternoon. You sit, carefully as always. Tea is poured. Again, you take your cup and sip. It's still too hot this time, so naturally you burn your tongue and have to pretend you didn't. The conversation is excruciating. "We saw the Everton's carriage as we were arriving," Miss Thistlewhite offers, her voice light but laced with curiosity. "Were they paying a call?" Her eyes sparkle and you realise you're being hunted. You nod, non-committal. "Yes," a brief one. "Oh, how lovely," says Eliza Hartnell with a smile so thin it could be used to slice cucumbers. "Mr. Everton is such reliable company." That's code, obviously. Victorian women invented a whole language of false compliments. Reliable means dull. Pleasant means bland. Sensible means unattractive but rich. It's like you're all playing a game of emotional charades with china cups in hand. "I imagine he's still making up his mind," says Poppy Gray with a voice like a distant church bell. She stares into her teacup as though it contains her soul. There's an awkward pause, broken only by the faint clink of teaspoons and the occasional terrible crunch of someone daring to eat a biscuit. This is your afternoon. This is how your time is spent, sitting in rooms with other unmarried women, passing tiny social clues like they're ancient runes. One wrong phrase, one too-spirited laugh, one moment of visible hunger for literally anything, affection, cake, sunlight, and you're on the fast track to full-blown spinsterhood, or worse, mockery. You try to steer the conversation to safer waters. "The roses are late to bloom this year," you offer weakly. Miss Thistlewhite perks up. "They are," I blame the frost. "Have you tried sugar water on the soil?" This somehow launches an extended, faintly terrifying discussion of horticulture. You listen, nodding at appropriate intervals, wondering if this is what being buried alive feels like, only with fancier upholstery. Eventually someone suggests a card game and you're all shepherded to a smaller side table with crisp linen and an unopened deck of playing cards. Whist. Of course. The game of choice for people who want to simulate fun without ever laughing out loud. You're partnered with Poppy Gray. She's either a card shark or just very lucky. Miss Hartnell seems visibly annoyed when you win 2 hands in a row, and by the third she's rearranging her skirt with aggressive intent. There's a sharp, unspoken competitiveness among you all. Not over the cards, of course, but over poise and charm, and who can sit the longest without blinking. The afternoon trickles away, a slow dripping hourglass of scones and veiled threats. By the time the ladies rise to leave, your back is stiff, your smile is exhausted, and you've said, "How very interesting," more times than your soul can endure. Historical fact? Victorian social calls followed strict rules. Guests were expected to stay precisely 15 to 30 minutes. Any longer, and it was considered vulgar, or worse, desperate. Fringe fact. Some women kept special call baskets by the door to collect calling cards. If they didn't like you, your card never made it into the drawing room. Savage. And the scholarly debate? There's ongoing discussion about whether these rigid social rituals empowered women to build covert support networks, or simply weaponized politeness as a form of control. Again, probably both, especially when you consider how many women ended up writing quietly scathing novels afterward. By the time the last hat is collected and the final farewell is murmured, you're utterly drained. You retreat back upstairs and let Mary unfasten the dress and loosen your corset, just enough to breathe without seeing stars. You flop backward onto the bed in your chemise and bloomers, limbs akimbo, corset askew, hairpins littering the pillow like fallen soldiers. You stare at the ceiling again and think, this is your job now, to exist gracefully, to be seen without being obvious, to navigate a minefield of lace, posture, and reputation, all while pretending you care deeply about ornamental shrubs. You begin to wonder how any of these women make it to 30 with their sanity intact. Or maybe they don't. Maybe the real mystery isn't why so many spinsters ended up living alone with cats. It's how they made it that far without setting their drawing rooms on fire. There is no such thing as a quiet afternoon in Victorian society. Even silence has weight here, an expectation humming just below the surface, a pressure to be elegantly poised while doing nothing of measurable value. You're beginning to understand that every moment you're not actively ruining your chances of marriage is a triumph, a low bar, but one you're now forced to celebrate. After the guests leave and your stays are loosened, only slightly of course, you're escorted to the small salon where unmarried ladies are expected to spend their afternoons in that delicate limbo between productivity and paralysis. It's not enough to just exist. You must appear industrious, graceful, modest, and somehow slightly ethereal, while also silently screaming inside your skull. Your mother enters briefly to nod her approval at the sight of you with a bit of embroidery in your lap. Then she vanishes again, likely to write letters or plot dowries or meditate on your failures. You have no idea. All you know is that the minute you're alone, you stare down at the cloth and realise. You have absolutely no idea how to embroider anything. You jab the needle into the hoop with something approximating effort. It's supposed to be a floral motif, maybe a daisy. It looks more like an amoeba having a midlife crisis. You sigh and try to make the next stitch more graceful, but the thread snags. The tiny design, intended to reflect your patience and virtue, now resembles a crime scene. Mary passes by the open door and glances in, her face unreadable. You get the sense she knows you've never embroidered a day in your life. Honestly, she might be judging your stitch technique from the hallway. You press on anyway, poking at the fabric while thinking dark, rebellious thoughts. The clock ticks. Again, and again, and again. Time has flattened into an endless loop of social performance. Occasionally you pause and look out the window at the garden. The ivy's creeping along the stone wall in that slow, indifferent way nature has when it's not trying to marry rich. Eventually a visitor arrives. Not for you, of course, but for your mother. An older gentleman with elaborate sideburns and the kind of cane that's more about status than walking. You don't catch his name, but you're made to join them for tea anyway. Apparently your presence is required, because seeing you might spark interest. You are, in essence, ornamental bait. You sit quietly at the edge of the conversation, smiling like a wax figure. They discuss weather, political happenings, in code, and, inevitably, the disappointing behaviour of someone's niece. You aren't invited to offer opinions, but when you do murmur something polite about the paper shortage affecting bookbinders, the man frowns slightly. Curious thing for a young lady to know, he says, sipping tea. Are you fond of literature? You nod, carefully. Yes, quite. He smiles, but not kindly. Best not to read too much. Can make a girl melancholy, or worse, too clever. Ah, there it is. The friendly reminder that intelligence in women is a risky currency. Spend too much of it, and no man wants to marry you. You're supposed to be witty, but not intellectual. Entertaining, but not opinionated. You're the 1800s equivalent of a decorative throw pillow, visibly charming but never actually used. After he leaves, your mother offers you a glance as sharp as the silver butter knife on the tea tray. You must be careful, she says quietly. Men don't want to be challenged. Of course not. That would be exhausting for them. Later that evening, after supper, which is dry chicken, root vegetables and more silence, you're instructed to set up the card table. This time it's just family. Your mother, one of your married sisters visiting with her brood of sullen children, and your unmarried cousin Harriet, who is at least 30 and looks like she's already halfway to sainthood just from tolerating life this long. You sit beside Harriet and whisper, "Is it always like this?" She glances at you, then returns to her cards. "No," she says. "Sometimes it's worse." The game is dull. The children are banished early, having made too much noise chewing. You play 2 rounds of a game called speculation that involves pretending to care deeply about imaginary currency. The air is thick with passive aggression. Your sister casually mentions how lucky she was to marry young, with a smirk in your direction. Your mother nods, clearly in agreement. You wonder if anyone in this room has had a sincere moment of joy in the last decade. As the evening winds down, your cousin leans in. "You're doing well," she murmurs. "They haven't written you off yet." "What happens when they do?" you ask. She doesn't answer, but she does take your hand and squeeze it once, briefly. That's somehow worse than any reply. Historical fact. In the Victorian era, unmarried women were often relegated to family duties, caretakers for aging parents or assistants to married siblings. It was the polite version of being shelved. Fringe fact. Some upper-class families actually had spinster rooms, smaller, colder bedrooms where the unmarried daughters were quietly stored, like sentimental china. And the scholarly debate? There's real contention over whether the spinster status was truly a failure by societal standards, or a form of accidental liberation. Sure, these women were denied the full privileges of wifehood, but some also gained privacy, autonomy, and time. Whether it was worth it? Still up for discussion. Back in your room, Mary begins undoing your dress, her fingers swift and impersonal. The corset unlaces with a sound like someone exhaling after years underwater. Your ribs expand gratefully. Your skin has faint indentations where the boning pressed all day. You sit on the bed, hair unpinned and falling like a curtain over one eye, and for a moment you just exist. Not perform, not smile, not court or flirt or embroider. You breathe, slow and full. Maybe this is what freedom feels like now, 23 seconds at night when no one's watching. It starts with a sneeze. Not yours, oddly enough, but from someone outside your window, an overworked gardener, you assume, judging by the grumble that follows. You're curled beneath 2 heavy quilts, wrapped in flannel and existential despair, but even the sneeze is a reminder that morning has come. Again. You pull the covers over your face, but there's no hiding in Victorian England, especially not for a spinster. Mary's already bustling around your room, opening the curtains as if sunlight is morally superior to shadows. It probably is here. She doesn't ask if you slept well because the answer doesn't matter. You're awake. That's the baseline requirement for the day. Everything else is icing, or rather, a dry biscuit with no butter. You've got your work laid out for today, she says, setting a basket of embroidery and thread beside your chair like a warden delivering prison tools. Lady Ingram is sending her daughter over this afternoon, best not be idle. Right. Social performance continues, even when no men are involved, especially then. Other women, married, younger, richer, sadder, are your most important audience and your fiercest competition. And today, apparently you're expected to impress someone whose entire identity is Lady Ingram's daughter. Fantastic. After dressing, another round of linen layers and self-denial, you settle by the window with your embroidery hoop. Your daisy-turned amoeba from yesterday has been discreetly adjusted by Mary overnight. It now resembles a flower. You suspect she fixed it for the sake of the household's dignity, not your own. You begin stabbing at the fabric again, trying to look productive while your mind drifts. The sky outside is soft and grey. A pair of blackbirds squabble in the hedge. The garden, though well manicured, has an undercurrent of chaos, ivy creeping where it shouldn't, beetles plotting something under the roses. You envy it. By mid-morning, the house takes on that faint nervous energy that comes whenever visitors are expected. Silver is polished, cakes are sliced, cushions are fluffed. Even your mother adjusts her brooch twice, a surefire sign that she considers this afternoon important. Lady Ingram's daughter arrives precisely on time, flanked by her own lady's maid and wearing a dress that looks like it cost more than your annual allowance. Her name is Clara, and she has that rare, terrifying ability to sit perfectly still while radiating judgment. She offers you a smile that doesn't reach her eyes and says, "What a lovely little room." You offer a non-committal thank you and pretend to focus on your stitching. Clara sits opposite you, folds her hands neatly in her lap and does not take off her gloves. The gloves are a power move. You are being evaluated. "You enjoy needlework?" she asks, scanning the disfigured daisy on your hoop. "I find it meditative," you lie. She nods. "My governess tried to teach me. I was always more interested in watercolours." Of course she was. Watercolours are the refined woman's rebellion. Artistic, but not too artistic. You smile and say nothing, and she leans forward slightly. "You've met Mr. Everton, I heard." Ah, the real reason for the visit slinks into the room like a cat with muddy paws. "Yes," you say, briefly. Her tone is light. "He called on me last Thursday. Brought his mother, of course. Such a dutiful son." Translation: "Stay in your lane. He's my project now." You keep your expression neutral. You've learned quickly in this world that sarcasm is a luxury and honesty is social suicide. The conversation limps along for another 20 minutes. Favourite composers, charity events, the tragedy of dried hydrangeas. Clara never once mentions ambition, or desire, or anything resembling a real emotion. But she does casually reference her aunt's estate in Bath 3 separate times. Subtle. When she leaves, your mother appears in the doorway like a pop-up warning message. "Charming girl," she says. "Such poise," and she speaks French. You nod, resisting the urge to say something in Latin just to cause problems. Once Clara is gone, the house returns to its usual hush. You retreat to your room, peeling off your gloves like they're wet bandages. You glance at the embroidery in your lap. The daisy is mocking you. And then it hits you. You've done nothing today. Nothing of meaning. You've spoken polite lies, stitched meaningless cloth, sipped tasteless tea. If this is what a good Victorian spinster does, what does a bad one look like? And where do you sign up? You head downstairs, past the drawing room and into the library. It's technically your father's domain, though he's rarely in it. He's either at his club or pretending you don't exist, but no one stops you. The house is too structured to imagine rebellion happening here, so small acts often go unnoticed. You trace your fingers along the book spines. Dusty, beautiful volumes with gold lettering. Shakespeare, Milton, Darwin, hidden behind a more respectable-looking atlas. You pull one down. Mary Wollstonecraft's A Vindication of the Rights of Woman. Scandalous, delicious. You flip through a few pages, heart beating slightly faster. Her words feel electric compared to the numb rituals of embroidery and tea. You read until your eyes ache, then tuck the book behind a thick hymnal just in case. If you're going to go rogue, you're going to do it in installments. Historical fact. The ideal Victorian woman was expected to be an angel in the house, a domestic, obedient figure whose greatest triumph was her silence. Unmarried women were often viewed with suspicion, their independence considered unsettling. Fringe fact. Some women kept secret libraries hidden behind false panels or disguised as cookbooks, safe spaces for banned philosophy, erotic poetry, or even political pamphlets. And the scholarly debate. There's a question historians still explore. Were Victorian women truly as repressed as we think, or did they cultivate entire inner lives beneath the surface? Diaries, letters, and quietly radical behaviour suggest the latter. Silence does not mean absence. Back in your room, you open your embroidery hoop again. You stare at the misshapen daisy and grin. Then you start stitching a snake beside it, just to see what happens. Sunday arrives like a velvet sledgehammer, quiet, stately and unrelenting in its demands. It starts with the toll of the church bell echoing through your bones before you've even finished buttoning your boots. Church isn't just a moral obligation in your Victorian spinster life. It's an all-out fashion show disguised as spiritual reflection. You're not just going to pray, you're going to perform. Mary laces you into your Sunday best, a stiff, forest green gown with sleeves like artillery, and a bonnet that could double as an umbrella in a pinch. You try to suggest a looser corset, perhaps as a nod to the Sabbath, but she pins you into it with the determined silence of someone not paid enough to entertain complaints. You can't blame her. You're not sure anyone is paid enough to deal with you right now. Downstairs, the family gathers in a slow, solemn shuffle. Your mother inspects your gloves, your hemline, and the general state of your facial expression. No frowning, she advises, which is hilarious, considering that's your default setting now. You step into the carriage, spine straight, teeth clenched, trying to look both devout and marriageable. The church looms ahead, a grey stone giant surrounded by wilting yew trees. Inside, the pews are arranged like trenches, with each family occupying their rightful position in the social hierarchy. You're ushered into your seat with quiet precision. Your mother nods to the vicar with just enough grace to imply mutual importance. And then, the show begins. Everyone's eyes are not on the pulpit. Not really. They're scanning bonnets, measuring waistlines, checking whose gloves have the right number of buttons and whether anyone's skirt dares to brush last season's hemline. You're both observer and observed. One girl 2 pews ahead has the gall to wear pale blue in October. Scandalous. You do your part. Hymns sung just loud enough to sound reverent, eyes closed in tasteful contemplation during the sermon. But the truth is, the sermon drifts over you like fog. The vicar is talking about virtue and meekness and the importance of silence, and all you can think about is how much the girl next to you smells like pressed lilies and resentment. The most active part of church is the walk back. It's not just a walk, it's the church parade, the Victorian version of strutting down a runway while pretending you don't care who's watching. Which is difficult when literally everyone is watching. Your family exits the church in full formation. You, unmarried and therefore mysterious, are positioned just behind your mother and in front of the married cousin with unfortunate facial hair. Strategic placement. You stroll slowly down the lane, arms looped delicately with your sisters, chin high, pace measured. The gravel crunches beneath your boots with the finality of a gavel. Ahead of you, a few gentlemen tip their hats. One smiles. Not at you, of course, at the woman beside you. Still, it counts. Maybe. At the far end of the lane, you spot him. Mr. Pudding Face. That's not his real name, obviously, but it's what you've started calling him in your head. He's a minor gentleman, probably third son of someone vaguely titled, with a face that always looks vaguely apologetic. He's been hovering near you at every social event lately, like a very polite cloud. He approaches, hat already in hand. "Miss," he says, with a bow so deep you worry he might topple forward. "Lovely service today." "Indeed," you reply, hands clenched around your prayer book. "Fine weather for October," he adds, though it's clearly about to rain. "Yes," you say, your voice the perfect blend of polite disinterest and strategic warmth. There's a pause. You see it in his eyes, that flicker of social calculation. This could be the moment. A walk, a visit, a conversation about the quality of the hymns. He opens his mouth, and then your mother appears, smiling too widely. "Mr. Elcombe," she says, so that's his name. "Do join us for luncheon, won't you?" He blinks. Oh, thank you, Ma'am. That would be most kind." And suddenly you're walking back to the house with Mr. Elcombe 3 paces behind, like an overcooked ghost. You hear him attempt to converse with your sister, then with your cousin, and finally, awkwardly, with you. "I noticed you prefer the alto part in the hymns," he says. "Very unique." You smile tightly. "Thank you. I've been told it's a sin." He chuckles, then stops, unsure if you're joking. You're not even sure anymore. Back at the house, luncheon is served with ceremony and slightly overcooked lamb. Mr. Elcombe tries to make conversation about something he read in the Times, but your mother deftly pivots it to the state of the garden. You remain mostly silent, offering occasional insights about the weather and the shape of the bread rolls. You are, once again, an extra in your own life. After the meal, Mr. Elcombe asks timidly if he might walk the garden with you. Your mother gives you the world's most subtle nod, which in Victorian mother terms is like blasting an air horn that says, "Say yes." You walk slowly along the hedgerow, avoiding puddles and deeper topics. "I've always liked yew trees," he says. "Morbid," you reply. He hesitates. "Pardon?" "They're associated with graveyards," you say. "Symbol of death and eternal life." Another silence. You've done it again. Said too much. Been too strange. You smile to soften it, but the moment has passed. Still he doesn't leave. He even smiles a little. "You read a lot, don't you?" he asks. "Yes." "That's rather interesting." It's the most sincere thing he's said all day. You both stand there in silence, listening to the wind rustle the ivy. Maybe he's not so bad. Maybe he's just as trapped as you are, bumbling through this rigid ballet of courtship with no real choreography. Historical fact. Sunday walks after church were a key part of Victorian courtship. They allowed for minimal chaperoned interaction, a sanctioned opportunity for awkward flirtation under the guise of fresh air. Fringe fact. Some Victorian women were known to sew secret pockets into their skirts where they kept pressed flowers from these walks, each one labelled with a name, date and potential level of interest. The romantic version of Excel. And the scholarly debate? Some argue that the church walk reinforced restrictive gender roles, while others believe it offered one of the few acceptable arenas for women to exercise subtle agency. Reading between the lines, literally, was an essential skill. As you return to the house, Mr. Elcombe thanks you and bows once again, as if you've done him some great favour. And in a way you have. You didn't run, you didn't insult him, you even talked about trees. You're the very picture of modest Victorian charm, and for a brief moment you almost believe it. Back in your room, the corset comes off, and so does the smile. You stretch your arms and breathe fully for the first time all day. Maybe next Sunday, you'll accidentally get consumption and avoid the whole affair. You don't mean to, but you think about him again the next morning while you're brushing your hair. 100 strokes, as expected, though it feels less like grooming and more like a soft form of penance. Mr. Elcombe, with his pudding face and nervous cough, has officially made it into your morning thoughts. Congratulations, sir. The bar is low, but you've tripped over it gently. Mary enters, arms full of fresh linen and already annoyed by something that is definitely not your fault, but will soon become your problem. "He sent flowers," she says flatly, nodding toward your writing desk. You follow her gaze and spot them. A modest bouquet of late autumn blooms in a chipped porcelain jug, a few half-wilted roses, some sprigs of greenery, one carnation trying its best. There's no card, but it doesn't need one. He's the only man in your orbit remotely brave enough, or bored enough, to try this hard. Mary mutters something about wasting water on weeds with delusions of grandeur and leaves, banging the door just hard enough to make a point. You walk over to the desk and stare at the bouquet. It's earnest, ugly, kind of sweet. You sit down, pull the jug closer, and stare into the awkward little arrangement like it might blink first. Later you take your embroidery, still Daisy adjacent, and retreat to the drawing room where your mother is conducting a miniature war over the week's social calendar. Invitations, RSVPs, quiet strategic rejections. It's all unfolding in low tones and raised eyebrows. You catch snippets as you pass. Mrs. Carraway's daughter is returning from Brighton, with an accent, unfortunately. Lord Brentwell is looking for a governess, not a wife. Lady Penworth claims to be not accepting guests. Has she had a stroke or simply good taste? You settle into your chair and begin stabbing the fabric again, less gently than you're supposed to. Within 10 minutes, your needle snags. Again. You swear, softly, like a lady, and unpick the stitch. This is not how a graceful spinster spends her morning, but grace is getting harder to fake. A letter arrives just before lunch. The butler hands it to your mother, who reads it with a frown that deepens slowly as she turns the page. "Well," she says finally, "Mr. Elcombe will be calling this afternoon. Alone. You feel your insides clench like a miser's purse. Alone. That's new. A man calling without his mother is like a fox entering the henhouse and politely asking to borrow a teacup. It suggests intent. Serious intent. Or a very poor understanding of protocol. The afternoon stretches out like a carpet rolled over hot coals. You change dresses twice. First a soft grey, too plain, then a lavender that makes you look like you're being auditioned for a funeral. You settle on the navy gown from last week. At least it has the structural integrity of a battleship. At 3 precisely he arrives. Mr. Elcombe is wearing gloves that are slightly too large, a hat he doesn't quite know how to carry, and an expression like someone who's just swallowed a truth too large to chew. He bows. You curtsy. The dance begins. You're sent to the smaller parlour, chaperoned, of course. Your cousin Harriet planted in the corner with her tatting, pretending not to listen. Mr. Elcombe takes a seat opposite you, hands folded, eyes fixed somewhere near your shoes. He clears his throat. "Miss," he says, "I wish to speak to you privately. If I may." You nod? Barely. Well, he swallows. "That is, I've enjoyed our acquaintance." You resist the urge to say, "We've spoken 4 times. Instead, you smile. A trained, modest smile that says, "Please continue this farce. I'm too exhausted to stop you." "I find you intelligent," he says, as if it's an accusation. "An agreeable company." You blink. That's it? That's the sales pitch? "And I was wondering," he continues, "if you might allow me to continue calling more regularly, with purpose." Ah, there it is. The pre-proposal stage. The Victorian version of "Can I put you in my top 8? You could say yes. You could nod, politely, and let the machinery of engagement begin grinding to life. He's respectable. He's breathing. He sent flowers. That's practically passion in this century. But something in you balks. You glance over at Harriet. She's pretending to count stitches, but her needle is frozen mid-air. You look back at Mr. Elcombe and hear yourself say very softly, "Might I ask something first?" He blinks. "Of course. Do you like me? Or do you like that I'm the only woman in town who hasn't laughed at your necktie?" His ears go pink. I beg your pardon?" You immediately regret the question. It was too sharp, too modern, too you, but it's out now, hanging in the room like a damp sock. "I only mean," you add quickly, "that I'm flattered. But if this is only a matter of convenience..." He straightens in his chair. "Miss, I assure you, I find you genuinely interesting." There's that word again. Interesting. The word men use when they don't quite know what you are, only that you've complicated their plans. You let a beat pass, then say, "Then yes, you may continue calling." His face splits into a relieved smile. He bows again, overly formal. "Thank you. I shall look forward to it." He leaves soon after. Harriet still hasn't moved. "You could do worse," she says once the door closes behind him. "I could do better," you reply. She smiles, just barely. "Maybe. But not round here. Historical fact. Victorian courtship was a complex, multi-tiered process. Calling with purpose meant a man was signalling serious interest, often under family supervision and with reputations at stake. Fringe fact: some women kept secret suitor diaries where they rated each caller in coded language. You suspect you'd give Mr. Elcombe a solid 5.5 unremarkable tolerable hat. And the scholarly debate? Some researchers argue that these courtship rituals gave women subtle power. They could delay, redirect, even decline, albeit within strict social limits. Others argue it was simply a well-decorated trap. Your current view? A bit of both, and none of it especially romantic. That night in the privacy of your bedroom you tuck the letter he brought, short, stiff, overly polite, into the drawer beside your secret book. You lie back, fully unlaced, hair unpinned, and wonder if this is how love begins in the Victorian age, with tepid flowers and nerves, not sparks, with permission, not passion. Or maybe, just maybe, it doesn't begin at all. Maybe it's all just tolerated, which frankly might be the most Victorian thing of all. The days that follow are stitched together with silk threads of repetition. Morning tea, corset lacing, quiet meals, carefully orchestrated strolls. It's all starting to blur like a watercolour left out in the rain. And somewhere in that blur, Mr. Elcombe becomes a regular feature, like a chair you never sat in but would miss if it disappeared. He doesn't say anything particularly interesting, and yet he always arrives with such careful politeness that you almost feel obligated to root for him, like a character in a novel who hasn't done much yet but has strong protagonist energy. He brings books now, titles selected with the cautious precision of someone trying not to offend. Moral tales, travel diaries, even a botanical guide. You flip through them with the detached courtesy of someone waiting for better literature, or possibly a secret message between the pages. But no, he's just that literal, and maybe that sincere. Your cousin Harriet continues to loom in the background of every visit like a particularly judgy ficus. She always has her embroidery, always looks as if she's counting stitches while also counting how long Mr. Elcombe stays. She rarely speaks during his visits, but you feel her thoughts pressing against your back like a second corset. One afternoon after he leaves, she finally says, "He's not the worst." You raise an eyebrow. "Thank you for the glowing endorsement." "I mean it." She doesn't look up. He listens. That's rare. "Does he?" you ask. "Or does he just wait politely for me to stop talking?" Harriet shrugs. Same thing most days. You think about that for a while, but while Mr. Elcombe's attentions increase, so too does the chatter. It's subtle at first. Comments from your mother about the virtue of patience in courtship, a few pointed remarks about the rising cost of dowries, even a mention of your father's increasing fondness for Mr. Elcombe's punctuality. But soon, it spreads beyond your household. It begins at a morning call with Mrs. Catterley, a woman whose sole personality trait is owns too many dogs. She offers you a biscuit and a smile dipped in arsenic. "Such a comfort to see young people forming attachments," she says, handing you tea that tastes faintly of disappointment. "Your Mr. Elcombe is so consistent." "He's not my anything," you reply automatically. "Oh," she says with a little laugh. "Not yet, of course." Then there's the apothecary's wife, who stops you outside the bakery to mention how fond she is of punctual men, and the vicar's youngest daughter, who asks if you'll be married by spring so she can borrow your hair combs for her wedding. By the end of the week, the entire village seems to have decided that your love life is public domain. You're starting to feel like a magazine subscription. Everyone has an opinion on how it should end, even if they never read past the first page, so naturally you start writing about it. You dig out the leather-bound journal you found tucked in the back of your desk drawer weeks ago, the one with soft yellowed pages and a lock that hasn't worked in years. You begin chronicling each of Mr. Elcombe's visits in absurd detail. What he wore, grey again. What he said, "You seem fond of hedgerows." How many times he cleared his throat, 7. But slowly the entries shift. You start recording the things you don't say out loud, the things no one would expect from a spinster. Like the fact that you sometimes wish he'd just say something stupid and sincere, instead of hiding behind polite silences. Or that you wonder if you even want to marry anyone, ever. Or if you'd be happier living in a drafty house with too many cats and an illegal printing press. Or that sometimes you dream of walking out of church in a bright red dress and laughing loudly in the middle of the procession, just to watch people's faces crack. Your journal becomes your best friend, your co-conspirator, your rebellion, written in cursive. You write late into the night, under candlelight, long after Mary has muttered something about eye strain and gone off to sleep. The ink smudges on your fingers. The pages fill with confessions no one else can hear. Here, you're honest, and strangely, you begin to feel a little more like yourself. Historical fact. Personal journals were common among Victorian women, especially those with limited public outlets. For some, they were a lifeline, places to explore politics, desire, rage, and even dreams of escape. Fringe fact. A few spinster diaries discovered posthumously contain surprisingly rebellious entries, lists of secret crushes, political rants, even imagined dialogues with fictional lovers. Victorian fan fiction, basically. And the scholarly debate? There's still discussion about whether these personal writings were meant to be private forever, or whether some women secretly hoped to be read. Maybe not in life, but in legacy. Perhaps these journals were both escape and evidence. Your journal becomes a place of power. It doesn't matter that the village whispers about you and Mr. Elcombe. It doesn't even matter that your mother has started discussing lace options just in case. Because in your little book, you're not a woman waiting to be chosen. You're the narrator, the playwright, the architect of your own absurd little world, and yet there's still something unfinished about it all. One morning, you wake early, too early, and sneak downstairs while the house still sleeps. You creep into the drawing room, past the cold fireplace and the velvet settee, and open the drawer where your mother keeps the calling cards. Dozens of them, tucked in neat little stacks. You flip through until you find Mr. Elcombe's. It's cream-coloured, with his name embossed in slightly trembling gold ink. Mr. Geoffrey Elcombe, second son. That's it. No titles, no flourishes, just a name, floating in space. You run your thumb along the edge of the card. It's ordinary, plain, like him, and yet you slip it into your pocket. Because deep down you don't know yet if he's just another suitor to be survived, or if he's something else entirely. Someone who sees you, or someone who never really looked. Either way, you're writing the next part yourself. The week opens with a letter. Not from Mr. Elcombe. He's taken to delivering his intentions in person now, one polite compliment at a time. But from your older brother, the golden boy of the family, currently enjoying the kind of career that involves horseback riding, cigar smoking, and absolutely no consequences. The envelope arrives mid-morning, thick with self-importance, and your mother reads it aloud as though reciting scripture. "Dearest family," she begins, her voice syrupy with pride. "I trust this letter finds you all in health and excellent spirits. My business in Manchester is progressing nicely, and I look forward to returning home in time for the harvest ball. You tune her out after that. Your brother is always doing well. He could fall into a peat bog and come out with a title and a land grant. He has never had to embroider anything or walk carefully, so his petticoats don't whisper of impropriety. He is, in the grand ledger of Victorian life, marked success, simply by virtue of being born with the right set of expectations. But the letter sets something off. Your mother's mood shifts from pleasant dictatorship to full royal proclamation. She begins reorganising the household schedule, redeploying the good silver, and casually reminding everyone that you're 24 and the harvest ball is not just a party, it's an opportunity, a battlefield in lace gloves. "I do think," she muses aloud, "that if you wear the rose-coloured gown and do something with your hair for once, you might make a better impression this year." You raise an eyebrow. "Better than what?" She smiles too tight. "Better than last year, darling." Which is rich, considering last year you were paired off with a young man who drank too much brandy and tried to compliment your collarbone before vomiting in the gardenias. Apparently that was still your fault, but this year you're older, sharper, and far more dangerous, if only because you've realised just how rigged the game is. Still, you say nothing. You let her plan your week, fittings, alterations, practice dances in the hallway with your younger cousin, who steps on your toes and laughs every time, and endless reminders to smile with restraint. You nod along, playing the part. Inside, however, your thoughts are elsewhere, on the small things you now notice, how your brothers inherited land and funds while you inherited expectations, how your opinions, though quietly brilliant, are still considered spirited at best and troublesome at worst. It becomes clear one evening when your father calls you into the study. This rarely happens. The study is a room for important male thoughts and expensive decanters of port. You enter, and he gestures to a chair. "I've had a letter from Geoffrey Elcombe's father," he says, skipping all preamble. You blink. "Oh?" He has asked whether your intentions are serious. You are briefly stunned by the implication that your intentions matter at all. Your father studies you. You're not getting any younger, and you're not exactly in demand. A pause. I see. No dowry has been mentioned yet, he adds, as if that softens the blow. But these things are best settled early. You wouldn't want to waste anyone's time. You almost ask whose time is being wasted. Yours, which has been occupied with ribbons and marriage markets since you were 15? Or Mr. Elcombe's, who chose to start this game? Instead, you nod, lips pressed into a line so fine it could be sewn into your next gown. After you leave the study, you don't go back to your room. Instead, you slip outside. The night is cool, quiet, and refreshingly disinterested in your marital prospects. You walk slowly through the garden, past rows of hydrangeas and thorny roses, letting the moonlight do what your corset won't, allow you to breathe. You find yourself at the edge of the orchard, near the family mausoleum. Victorian property comes with the weirdest accessories, and sit on a stone bench that's colder than your mother's compliments. You think about the future, not in the grand romantic way you used to when you imagined scandalous love letters and poetic suitors. No, this is more logistical. A mental list of options. Option 1, marry Mr. Elcombe. You'd probably be tolerated, maybe even gently liked. He'd read in the study, and you'd manage the house and occasionally discuss the temperature of the tea. Children would follow. You'd become someone's mother, someone's wife, and eventually someone's widow. Option 2, remain unmarried. Move in with your married sister. Become the weird aunt with strong opinions and a hidden flask. Possibly take up painting or hysteria. Option 3, run away and join a circus, or a convent, or form a secret society of rebellious women who read banned books and refuse to marry anyone who calls them interesting. That last one has a certain appeal. Historical fact. In Victorian England, inheritance laws heavily favoured men. Even women of wealth rarely controlled their own property after marriage, unless special legal arrangements were made. Most women passed from their father's household to their husband's without ever holding true autonomy. Fringe fact. Some women, known as surplus women, were labelled as such by census data. Literally surplus to societal need because they outnumbered marriageable men. The term was treated like a diagnosis, and the scholarly debate, some argue that Victorian spinsters were victims of patriarchal neglect, left behind by a system designed to exclude them. Others argue that they carved out a hidden power within that exclusion, embracing independence in a world that feared it. The truth is messy. Like all human stories, back in your room, you find your journal waiting. You pick it up, but instead of writing, you just hold it. Tonight, your thoughts feel too big for the page. You think about Mr. Elcombe. Earnest, awkward, loyal. You think about your father, treating your future like a transaction. You think about the harvest ball, your dress, the possibility of more whispered judgments. But mostly, you think about how unfair it all is, and how no one ever admits that aloud. You exhale, steady yourself, and whisper into the silence. Maybe I'll ruin everything just to see what happens. And for the first time in days, you smile. The invitation arrives on stiff ivory cardstock, hand-delivered by a footman who looks far too proud of himself for carrying a rectangle with calligraphy on it. Your mother reads it aloud with the reverence usually reserved for royal decrees or winning lottery tickets. Ladies' luncheon in honour of Miss Arabella Grange, hosted by Lady Effington, she recites, holding the card like it's edged in diamonds. You, still halfway through a very uninspired slice of toast, suppress a sigh. Luncheon, she repeats, as if the word might suddenly change your life. With Lady Effington. You must go. It's a rare invitation, and Miss Grange is fresh from the continent. She may know people. Know people is code for might help you marry up. But you don't argue. You nod, like a well-trained governess's pony, and agree to attend the gathering where conversation will likely be measured in teaspoons and the air thick with powdered ambition. You're dressed in a dove-grey muslin by late morning, boots buffed, gloves lightly perfumed. Mary pins your hair into a severe bun that makes you look slightly more respectable and slightly less alive. You look in the mirror and see the spinster archetype in full form, composed, blandly pretty, discreetly intelligent. All the qualities that make you completely ignorable in a crowded room. Exactly the point. The carriage ride is quiet, bumpy and slightly nauseating, which sets the tone nicely. Lady Effington's house is enormous in the kind of way that makes you suspect no one's cleaned behind the curtains since the last monarch died. The luncheon is already underway when you arrive, and a small army of ladies occupies the drawing room like a brigade of perfumed soldiers waiting for their cue. You're announced with all the enthusiasm of a tax notice. Still, a few heads turn, some polite, some predatory. You're offered a seat beside a woman in violently ruffled lilac, and another whose feathers might be alive. Someone pours you tea before you can decline. The cup is too hot, the handle absurdly small, and you've already committed to smiling. There is no conversation, only carefully aligned sound. Miss Arabella Grange, the guest of honour, is introduced with ceremonial delight. She is delicate and lovely and painfully well-bred, with the kind of complexion that suggests she's never encountered wind, dust, or any form of human suffering. She speaks softly with precise little pauses like she was trained to be a musical instrument rather than a person. Her eyes flick to you once, just once, and that's it. You're dismissed. The rest of the table is a lesson in subtle combat. One woman speaks about her sister's recent engagement, and how the groom is only a baronet, but such a refined one. Another launches into a tale about a scandalous dance in Bath, involving a military officer and a pastry chef. Every topic is veiled gossip, a game of social chess where the goal is to reveal nothing and learn everything. You sip your tea, you say little, and yet you are watched. Spinster radar is real. These women can smell unclaimed ovaries from 3 tables away. Lady Effington eventually turns to you and says, "And how are things progressing with Mr. Elcombe? I understand he's taken quite the liking to you." You smile in that awful, reflexive way women are trained to when someone says something sharp in the tone of a compliment. "Mr. Elcombe is attentive," you reply, choosing your word like it's part of a minefield. "Attentive," she repeats, amused. "That's a lovely word." Miss Grange tilts her head. "Are you soon to be engaged?" "I'm not sure yet," you say, which is true. What you're sure of is that this feels like a committee auditioning you for a position you never applied for. There's an awkward pause, not because your answer is scandalous, but because it implies autonomy. You were supposed to say, "God willing," or "if my parents approve," something that keeps you properly tethered. Instead, you've slipped the leash just slightly, and everyone noticed. Dessert arrives. Something trembling and oversweet. Conversation resumes, but now it's about you, in that sideways way English society has perfected. References to decisive women and modern attitudes, and the value of quiet obedience. The air smells like roses and judgment. You endure it, because that's what you're expected to do, because you're good at playing the game even when you loathe the board. After the meal, the ladies drift to the drawing room to embroider or feign interest in sheet music. You escape to the balcony under the guise of needing air. It's cold and bright outside, a slap of October wind across your cheeks. You breathe deeply for what feels like the first time all day. Below, the garden spreads out like a map of restraint. Trimmed hedges, obedient flowers, even the bees seem to buzz within permitted zones. Then, unexpectedly, a voice. You're not like the others. You turn. Miss Grange stands beside you, looking every bit as delicate as inside, but with sharper eyes now. Less porcelain, more steel. You blink. "Pardon?" "They're afraid of women who think," she says. "You shouldn't let it stop you." You don't know what to say. She gives you a tiny, wicked smile and adds, "I studied in Florence, with a woman who translated Virgil and smoked cigars. I'm not supposed to mention that here." "I imagine not," you say, finally smiling. She sips her tea, of course she brought it out with her, and stares into the garden. "They want you to be a mirror," she says. "Reflect what they expect. Say nothing real." "And you?" you ask. "Oh, I'm playing the game," she says cheerfully, "but I plan to win it on my own terms." She returns inside before you can respond. You stand alone for a while, the wind tugging at your sleeves, your mind racing. That brief conversation with Miss Grange was the first honest moment all day, and it hit you like a door swinging open where you thought there was only a wall. Historical fact. Ladies' luncheons in the Victorian era were performances of refinement. Strictly female spaces where social ranking was recalibrated based on alliances, dress, and whispered rumour. Fringe fact. Some women, especially those with continental education or artistic connections, would drop forbidden comments in these settings just to test who was paying attention. A kind of covert signal for fellow rebels. And the scholarly debate? Historians disagree on whether these all-female gatherings were tools of repression or coded spaces of resistance. Was the embroidery circle a gag order or a smokescreen? Hard to say. Depends who was holding the needle. On the ride home, your mother chats absently about Miss Granger's hair and how Lady Effington's new curtains were a bit too French. You stare out the window, watching the countryside flicker past like a series of choices. You think about mirrors and what happens when one finally cracks. By the end of the week, the house begins to shift in that subtle, anticipatory way that always means someone important is coming, or something dreadful is about to happen. Furniture is dusted twice, polished until your reflection looks back at you like a prisoner. Flowers are replaced daily, no matter how alive they still are. Even the hallway rugs are restretched, which is a quiet kind of violence reserved for moments of extreme social anxiety. You overhear talk of preparations, a ride, they say, with Mr. Elcombe. Supervised, of course, but still, a ride. Your stomach knots. Horseback riding, as it turns out, is not about horses. It's about posture. It's about appearances. It's about sitting atop a half-ton animal and pretending your petticoats aren't actively trying to murder you while someone evaluates your spine and conversational ability at a slow trot. Mary is merciless that morning. "You'll wear the grey," she announces, dragging out a side-saddle riding habit with stiff lapels and buttons that look like they were forged from bad decisions. "It's your most forgiving colour." "Forgiving of what?" you ask. She doesn't answer. She never does. By mid-morning, you're standing in the front courtyard beside a small, dignified horse named Maisie, who clearly resents all forms of human behaviour. Mr. Elcombe arrives 10 minutes late, already apologising as he adjusts his gloves. He's mounted atop a chestnut gelding that looks slightly more elegant than he does, though that's not saying much. "You look very capable," he says, offering a small bow. Capable? A thrilling word. Nothing stirs the romantic spirit like being compared to a good set of fireplace tongs. You mount awkwardly, a maid holding your skirt, a footman stabilising your saddle. Nothing about it is graceful. Everything about it feels like a public punishment for women who dared to be born with opinions. But eventually you're seated, stiff and side-saddled, and the procession begins. Your chaperone for the day is your Aunt Clementina, who smells like cloves and always carries a small Bible, mostly as a prop. She rides a small, sedate mare and positions herself just behind you, close enough to hear every word and report them later. You and Mr. Elcombe ride side by side along the lane, through open fields dotted with the remains of summer, wilting wildflowers, brittle grass, crows circling with the sort of interest that makes you nervous. It's a beautiful day, but neither of you mentions it. Instead, he clears his throat and begins what can only be described as conversational smallpox. "I read an article," he says, "about the economic state of India. Fascinating, really." You nod politely. "Yes, the Crown's management has been instructive." He seems briefly startled. "Indeed." "Quite." There's a silence, a longer one. You try to help him out. "Do you ride often?" He looks relieved by the simplicity. "Oh yes, though I fell once, fractured a rib. My brother told everyone I cried, which is ridiculous, of course." You smile. "Of course." The ride continues. The path narrows, trees rising up on either side like green-cloaked judges. Your legs are starting to cramp, and Maisie is beginning to test your resolve with each resentful snort. But still, you ride, because to stop now would be a small social death. Eventually you reach a clearing. The sun breaks through the trees like it's been waiting for applause. Your aunt nods for you to pause here, presumably so she can drop just far enough behind to allow conversation but not temptation. And it's in that moment, under the arch of trees, the scent of pine and horse sweat mingling in the air, that Mr. Elcombe turns to you, face slightly pink. "I've enjoyed this," he says, "though I realise I may not be entirely thrilling." You raise an eyebrow. "You've been perfectly decent." "Decent," he echoes, "the curse of our class." You smile, a real one this time. Then, unexpectedly, he continues, "I rather think I would like to be more than decent. With you." You look at him. Not his coat or his boots or his horse, but him, the man behind the manners, and for the first time you see something flicker there. Real feeling, trying desperately to survive in a world built to suffocate it. He looks down, embarrassed. "I'm making a mess of it, aren't I?" You exhale. "No, you're just making something, which is more than most." There's a long pause, birds chatter overhead. The wind picks up and makes your veil flutter like it's trying to escape. "You don't have to decide now," he says softly. "I just wanted you to know." You nod. "Thank you for saying it." Most wouldn't. And then, Mercifully, your aunt clucks her tongue and calls ahead, breaking the moment like a teacup dropped onto marble. You ride back in silence, but it's not empty anymore. It's full, like something important was said and neither of you knows what to do with it just yet. That evening, back in your room, you peel off the riding habit and soak your sore legs in lukewarm water, while Mary mutters about grass stains and poor posture. You don't care. You're still thinking about the clearing, the way he looked when he said more than decent. You wonder if anyone's ever said that to him before, if anyone ever let him be more. Historical fact. Side saddle riding was a social requirement for upper-class Victorian women, designed to protect modesty while silently screaming you don't get to move freely. It was difficult, dangerous, and entirely impractical. Fringe fact. Some rebellious women rode astride in secret, especially in the countryside or during early suffragist movements. They called it riding like a man, which mostly meant riding like someone who didn't want a hip injury. And the scholarly debate? Historians continue to argue over whether enforced riding etiquette was simply a metaphor for broader gender limitations, or if it served as a quiet arena where women could occasionally assert power through skill, daring, or sheer stubbornness. Back in bed, journal open in your lap, you write just one line. I don't know if I want to marry him, but I want to be the kind of woman who gets to choose. You stare at the sentence for a while, then underline it. Twice. You don't mean to speak Latin, it just slips out, like a small, traitorous fish escaping a tidy net of social decorum. One moment, you're seated in the drawing room with your needlework and your passive silence, nodding along to a conversation about the weather and the cost of fresh figs in the market, and the next, you've translated an entire motto embroidered above the fireplace out loud, fluently. Virtues in arduis, you murmur, your eyes half-lidded with boredom. Virtue in hardship. Though given this wallpaper, I'd say patience is the more pressing virtue. There's a beat of absolute silence. Teacups hover mid-air. The air thickens like overcooked pudding. Then, slowly, every neck in the room turns toward you like flowers pivoting to face the sun, except there is no warmth in the gaze, only polite horror. Your mother blinks twice. Darling, she says through her teeth. How clever. You smile, because you can't unsay it and you sure as hell won't apologise. But the damage is done. You've crossed a line invisible to the naked eye, but carved deep into the bones of society. Latin is for men, for priests and scholars and the back rooms of dusty libraries. When a woman speaks Latin, especially without stumbling, without shame, it sends ripples through the calm little pond of domestic womanhood. And right now, you've cannonballed into the centre of it. Later, in the safety of your room, Mary sighs as she unlaces your corset. You shouldn't let them know what you know, she says, fingers working efficiently. They won't like it. I wasn't aware I needed to disguise literacy, you reply. Mary shrugs. You don't, unless you want to be liked. The next morning, you're not allowed near the front parlour. You've been reassigned to the small sitting room off the library, the one no one uses unless they're being punished or reading sentimental novels. There's a single sad fern in the corner and a chair that squeaks every time you shift. You sit there, banished with your embroidery in your brain. Your mother floats in eventually, her expression that tight-lipped version of parental affection that means you've embarrassed her just enough to warrant correction, but not enough to be disowned. Sweetheart, she says, sitting beside you, you must be more careful. With Latin? With everything, she replies. People are beginning to talk. Let them, you mutter, she tuts. That's exactly the sort of thing that gets women forgotten. But isn't that already happening? The forgetting. Each day blending into the next, your sharpness dulled by small talk and seam work, your real thoughts trimmed like thread from the hem of a garment no one asked you to stitch. You nod, though, and say nothing more. That's what a good daughter does. Smile, stay quiet, and try not to mention dead languages. Except now they start avoiding you. Not entirely, of course. That would be vulgar. But there's a subtle withdrawal. You notice it during morning calls. The ladies turn their chairs slightly away when you speak. Conversations pause when you enter a room and resume just as you leave. They nod politely when you mention books and immediately steer the discussion back to recipes and travel plans. And yet there's a small upside. Men seem vaguely intrigued now, like you're a puzzle box with too many locks. One suitor asks if you've read all the Latin, as though it's a single short pamphlet. Another, upon hearing that you speak it, jokingly asks if you're cursed. That one is your favourite. You almost say, yes, and so are you now, just to see him choke on his biscuit. Even Mr. Elcombe notices the shift. He arrives 2 days later for his usual visit and brings with him a gift, a slim book bound in worn green cloth. You open it. Cicero, in translation. I thought, he says, you might enjoy it. You raise an eyebrow. It's been years since I read the Orator, but thank you, he blinks. You read the original? I did, you say, but the translation is always amusing, he smiles. I don't mind being amusing if it makes you smile. That surprises you. You don't know what to say to that. He sits awkwardly on the edge of his chair. I heard what happened, he says after a pause. With the Latin. It's not a scandal exactly, but there's chatter. Of course there is. I think it's admirable, he says quietly, knowing things. Not pretending otherwise. You glance up. He's not looking at you. He's looking at the fireplace as if it's safer to say it to the embers. I wish I'd been allowed to learn more, he adds, but I was sent off to school and told what to think. You stare at him for a long moment, uncertain whether to feel affection or pity. Maybe both. You're still allowed to think now, you say gently. He finally meets your gaze. Are you? The question hangs there between you, bare and dangerous. Historical fact. While many upper-class Victorian women were taught basic Latin phrases as part of their education, fluent reading or interpretation was considered unseemly. Serious study of the classics was reserved for men, even if women were just as capable. Fringe fact. Some girls secretly learned Latin from their brothers' tutors, or by hiding behind library doors. A few even passed themselves off as men to attend university lectures, cloaked rebellion in every sense. And the scholarly debate? Historians disagree on how much these women influenced intellectual life. Were they invisible geniuses, supporting the published men behind the scenes? Or were they simply erased? Brilliant minds dissolved into the domestic sphere without ever being credited? You keep the Cicero volume beside your bed now, right next to your journal, and the pressed violet you picked from the garden after your ride with Mr. Elcombe. You don't read it every night, but its presence feels like a small victory. A reminder that your mind is still yours, even if the world prefers it sheathed. That evening you write another entry. Today I spoke Latin and made enemies. Tomorrow, maybe I'll speak Greek and lose a friend. At least they'll know I was thinking the whole time. You close the book gently and place it beneath your pillow. Let them talk. It begins with a slipper left precisely where it shouldn't be. Wedged just outside your dressing room door, toes pointed inward like a scolded child. You stare at it for a moment, half asleep before realizing it's yours, and you most definitely did not leave it there. It's an unmistakable message, the Victorian version of a passive-aggressive post-it note. We need to talk, and I control your footwear. You pick it up, confused but intrigued, and glance around the hallway. Nothing, no sounds, no movement, but the message is clear. Mary is displeased, and indeed, when she enters the room minutes later with your morning tea and the usual ration of eye contact avoidance, she's carrying herself with the tension of a woman who's decided to hate you, but hasn't yet committed to the full performance. I found your journal, she says, like she's announcing the death of someone you never met. Your heart freezes. You went through my things, she shrugs. You left it in the open. Under your pillow isn't exactly the Tower of London. You open your mouth to respond, but she's already busy yanking open the wardrobe, selecting your petticoats with a theatrical rustle that practically screams, "Let's pretend we're still civil." Did you read it, you ask? She turns slowly. Only enough to recognise myself. Ah, then you know, you say softly. That you think I'm plotting your downfall? That I'm writing a novel? She snorts. Flattering. And completely wrong. You flush. Of course she'd find the passage. Half a page of sarcasm-laced musings about her endless mutterings, her precise tucking of sheets, her mysterious disappearances during emotionally loaded moments. It had seemed harmless at the time, like an inside joke with yourself. But now, staring at her with her arms full of linen and judgment, you feel something more complicated than guilt. She's angry, your journal had read. Not loud or cruel, but seething in a steady way, like a kettle just before the whistle. I think she's writing something too, something better than embroidery. Perhaps she'll have the last word. You didn't mean it as an insult, not exactly, but the line had teeth and Mary found the bite. I'm sorry, you say. Mary tilts her head. I'm not. You blink. Pardon? She drops the linens in your chair and crosses the room in 2 measured steps. You think I hate you because I'm short with you, because I pin you too tightly, because I don't simper or curtsy, or tell you you're clever every time you quote Cicero. Well, you say carefully, you don't not do those things. She lets out a sharp breath. Do you know what it's like watching someone with a brain walk around acting like they have to ask for permission to use it? Your eyes widen. You write in your little book about rebellion, she says, but you still sit in the parlour with your embroidery hoop, waiting for a man who's never going to understand you. You feel heat rise in your throat. That's unfair. Is it? She asks, stepping closer. You think I'm angry? You're furious. You just hide it in pretty sentences. She's not wrong, which makes it worse. And for your information, she continues, I am writing something. Not a novel. Plays. Dialogues. Ridiculous little monologues about women like you who think too much and do too little. You stare at her. How long? Since I was 15, she says. I stole parchment from my employer's desk and wrote in the pantry by candlelight. Nearly set the biscuits on fire. There's a pause, dense with recalibration. You're looking at her now like she's an entirely different species. Not your maid, not your shadow, but a woman. One with ideas. One who sees through you. Why didn't you say anything, you ask? She shrugs again, but it's quieter this time. Because you never asked. The silence that follows is strangely sacred. You sit on the edge of the bed, still in your nightdress, and she stands by the hearth, arms crossed, breathing like she's just finished a race. The maid and the mistress, if those words even still mean anything, staring at each other like women in a cracked mirror. Eventually she speaks. You're not the only one who wants more. You nod, throat tight. You should write about that, she says. Not embroidery, not Mr. Elcombe. Write what it's actually like. You pick up your journal that night with a different kind of reverence. The cover feels heavier now, like it's inherited weight from the day. You write, Today, I was told the truth by the woman who dresses me. She has dreams too. Pages. Fire. I wonder how many women in this house are waiting for someone to ask who they really are. I wonder what I'd say if anyone asked me the same. Historical fact. Many Victorian maids were literate, especially those in wealthier households. Some wrote letters home, others kept diaries, and a rare few wrote fiction, often anonymously or under male pseudonyms. Fringe fact. One of the earliest known working-class women to publish plays under her own name was Elizabeth Baker, a former typist who wrote realist dramas about women's limited economic choices in Edwardian society, and the scholarly debate. There's an ongoing discussion about the hidden intellectual lives of domestic workers. Were they passive victims of class structure or silent resistors, chronicling the world they served? Increasing evidence suggests the latter, and that they shaped more culture than they were ever credited for. The next morning you leave your journal slightly open on the corner of the desk, just enough to be an invitation. Not for Mary to read it again, but to know that she could. You dress without complaint, even let her pin your sleeves tighter than usual, and when she's halfway out the door you say, If you ever want to read my journal properly, just ask. Mary pauses, then glances back over her shoulder. If you ever want to read one of my monologues, she says, try not to laugh. You nod. Deal. The door clicks shut behind her and you stare at the empty room for a moment before scribbling a final line. The revolution will probably begin in the linen closet. It's the envelope that does it. Thick, wax-sealed and resting on the silver salver like a dead bird someone politely decided not to mention. The butler, grim as always, presents it to your mother during breakfast as if it's just another scrap of correspondence. But the minute she sees the crest, 3 lions and a suspicious amount of gold ink, her eyebrows rise half an inch. A silent gasp in maternal dialect. From Amelia, she says. That's your cousin, the one banished to the continent after the incident no one speaks about unless they've had too much sherry. Your mother slides her butter knife under the seal with the skill of a seasoned diplomat, unfolding the parchment slowly, as if worried it might catch fire. You pretend not to watch from across the table, nibbling on dry toast and pretending to care about the marmalade. She reads silently. Then she folds the letter again, neatly, deliberately, and sets it aside. Well, she says, smoothing her napkin, there's been a development. That phrase alone makes the room colder. A development in your family generally means one of 3 things. Someone's pregnant, someone's dead, or someone's ruined. You wait. It appears, she begins, with the kind of tone used to describe mildew, that Amelia has eloped to Naples with a painter. You blink. A painter? Half French, your mother mutters, as if that makes it worse. Harriet, who's visiting for the week and currently dissecting a poached egg like it insulted her, snorts softly. At least she aimed for something romantic. Your mother shoots her a look. It's disgraceful. She's disgraced herself, her family, and by extension, she flicks her eyes toward you. All of us? Of course. Guilt by genetics. The table falls into silence again. You can feel the tension blooming around you like damp rot. Elopement is not a crime, technically, but in the world you inhabit it might as well be high treason. Love, unapproved by committee, is anarchy in a cravat. What will happen to her, you ask finally. Your mother sighs. If she's lucky, her husband dies before she does. Charming. The rest of the day unfolds in a fog of subtle panic. A letter is dispatched to your aunt. There's talk of inheritance complications, of social fallout, of invitations suddenly being rescinded. Amelia's name is scrubbed from family anecdotes like a typo in an official document. Her portrait is removed from the upstairs hall by dinner. She should have known better, your mother mutters, almost to herself. You think about that. Should she have? Or did she know exactly what she was doing? Maybe running off to Naples with a French painter was the clearest thought Amelia ever had. Later, in the drawing room, your father, blissfully unaware of everything not related to port, asks if anyone's seen the newspaper. Your mother says no, though you all know she's already buried it under her embroidery box to avoid seeing anything French. Harriet corners you by the fireplace. You ever think of running? She asks, her eyes sharp with something that might be envy. Where would I go? You whisper. She smirks. Anywhere that doesn't care about seating charts and scandal. You don't answer. You just stare at the fire and wonder how hot it would need to be to burn a corset. That night, you return to your journal and write furiously. The words spill out like water from a cracked cup. Amelia ran. She leapt from the ledge they told us we had to live on. Maybe she fell, but maybe she landed, and maybe she's happier with paint under her fingernails than she ever would have been with a title she had to curtsy for. You pause, then add, they say she's ruined, but from where I'm sitting, she might be the only one of us who's free. The next day the whispers begin. They arrive in the form of not-so-subtle glances during a visit to the village shop. A neighbour touches your arm and says, "So sorry about your cousin," in a tone better suited to funerals than foreign honeymoons. Even the vicar's wife offers you a look that lands somewhere between pity and suspicion. By the end of the afternoon, your cousin's sin has fused itself to your skin. You're related, you're unmarried, you speak Latin. To them, the conclusion is obvious. You might be next. Mr. Elcombe calls that evening. He looks slightly more nervous than usual, his collar askew, a faint line of sweat under his hat. He doesn't mention Amelia, not directly, but there's a strange tension in his smile. "I trust your family as well?" he asks. "As well as can be expected," you reply, voice smooth. "Considering the tide of moral collapse?" He laughs nervously. "Yes, well, families can be unpredictable." You let the silence stretch just long enough to make him sweat. Then you say, "Have you ever thought about leaving it all behind?" He blinks. "Pardon?" "Running, starting fresh. No titles, no reputations, no corsets." He smiles faintly. "Only every day. But I don't know where I'd go." You nod. "Neither do I." Historical fact. In Victorian society, elopement, especially abroad, was one of the few ways women could reclaim agency over their lives. It was dangerous, of course, risky, but for some, it was the only exit. Fringe fact? Some couples faked elopements to provoke family approval. A kind of social brinkmanship. Either accept us or lose us forever. It often worked. Parents cared more about appearances than actual love, and the scholarly debate. Historians have long argued over whether Victorian women who ran off were reckless romantics or calculated revolutionaries. But more recent scholarship suggests something else entirely. They were survivors, navigating a rigged system with the only tools they had: desperation, defiance, and hope. You go to sleep with the image of Amelia in your head, windswept, laughing, holding a brush instead of a teacup. In your dreams, you're standing beside her, barefoot in the Naples sun with paint-stained fingers and no last name at all. You're halfway through your third petticoat when the conversation drifts unexpectedly toward revolution. Not the pitchforks and burning palaces kind, although, to be honest, you wouldn't mind, but the quieter kind. The kind that happens behind teacups and closed doors, where political debate is camouflaged as polite observation, and no one dares raise their voice above a ladylike murmur. It's a rainy afternoon, and you're gathered in the drawing room with a few other women. Harriet, your sharp-tongued cousin, Miss Eliza Hartnell, she of the overly perfected curtsy, and Lady Marjorie Fawn, a woman whose bonnet deserves its own inheritance. You've all been trapped indoors for hours, the windows fogged, the fireplace sputtering in the half-hearted way of Victorian heating, and the conversation finally begins to loosen. "I heard," Eliza says, dabbing at her nose with a handkerchief embroidered to within an inch of its life, "that Lady Westermore has started giving donations to those people." "Which people?" you ask, partly to be polite, mostly to stir the pot. Eliza's voice drops. "You know, the women." "Ah," you say, "those women." Harriet snorts softly into her tea. "Suffragists, you mean?" Eliza flinches like someone mentioned a dead uncle. "I'd never say it aloud, of course." Lady Marjorie lifts an eyebrow so high you're surprised it doesn't knock off her hat. "I met one once," she announces, "at a lecture in London. Very intense. Eyes like someone who's been yelled at for thinking too much." "And what did she say?" you ask, intrigued. "She said women should be allowed to own property, to vote, and—" She leans in, lowering her voice dramatically. "To divorce." Eliza gasps. "Divorce? But that's—" "Legal," Harriet cuts in. "Technically." Lady Marjorie shrugs. "She made some compelling points." "Not that I agreed, of course, but it does make you think." You glance down at your lap, at the petticoat you've been folding for what feels like 6 years. Your fingers are numb, your corset is pinching, and your brain is humming. Divorce, votes, property. You're not supposed to want these things. You're not even supposed to consider them. And yet, the thought drifts through your mind like perfume. Faint, forbidden, intoxicating. Harriet catches your eye and gives you a small knowing smirk. Later that evening, when the guests have left and your mother is busy drafting a letter of complaint to the baker about the bread being too French, you sneak into the library. Not the grand one downstairs where your father keeps the locked cabinet, but the small dusty annex by the pantry, a place no one but the servants and the spiders seem to frequent. You've been here before, of course, but tonight you're not looking for poetry or botanical diagrams. Tonight you're looking for answers, and you find them. Tucked behind a volume of sermons for the slightly wayward woman is a thin pamphlet. No title on the spine. You open it carefully, the pages crackling with age and potential. It's a manifesto, printed in faint ink with margins crammed full of tiny frantic annotations. The first line reads, "The world will not change unless we dare to speak." You sit cross-legged on the cold floor, skirts pooling around you like a discarded tablecloth, and begin to read. Paragraph after paragraph railing against the laws that silence women, the marriage contracts that erase them, the wealth that passes over them like inheritance is allergic to ovaries. And there's fury in the words, but also hope. It's not signed. Of course it's not. Whoever wrote this risked exile, scandal, or worse. But someone, maybe a servant, maybe a lady with too many quiet afternoons, read it and hid it here. For you. You read until your candle flickers low, then slide the pamphlet into your skirt pocket like a secret weapon. You walk quietly back upstairs, heart pounding with something unfamiliar. Not fear, resolve. The next morning you notice how everyone speaks a little too cheerfully, as if compensating. Even Mary is suspiciously polite, pressing your bodice flatter than necessary but humming while she does it. Harriet passes you in the hallway and murmurs, "Careful with your pocket today. It looks like you're smuggling contraband." You grin. "Technically I am." That afternoon, during tea with your mother and Lady Pigeon, an elderly friend with hearing loss and opinions sharp enough to cut diamonds, your mother brings up marriage. Again. "Mr. Elcombe has written," she says. "He's asking to speak with your father about a formal proposal." The words hang in the air like fog. Thick, slow, hard to breathe through. "That's wonderful," Lady Pigeon says, though she's clearly not sure who Mr. Elcombe is. You force a smile. "Yes. Wonderful." Later in your room you pull out the pamphlet again. You read it aloud this time quietly, your voice filling the space like incense. We are told to be silent, but silence breeds rot. We are told to obey, but obedience is not virtue, it is self-erasure. To be a woman in this world is to live beneath a glass ceiling of lace and law. Break it. You breathe the words in like air, like truth. historical fact. By the mid-19th century, the women's rights movement was gaining traction in Britain. Petitions were circulated, essays published, and women began organising in salons and private homes to discuss suffrage, education and marital law reform. Fringe fact: secret pamphlets and underground publications were passed hand to hand between women, often hidden in recipe books or tucked behind hymnals. Many of these documents remain anonymous to this day, and the scholarly debate? Some historians argue that these documents had little tangible impact, reaching only a small, privileged few. Others insist they were vital sparks, small acts of rebellion that eventually ignited larger flames. You write in your journal that night, "Today, I touched the edge of something bigger than corsets and courtship. I want to be more than a guest in my own story. I want to be the one holding the pen," and you underline it not once, not twice, but with such force that the quill nearly tears the page. The first sign that something is wrong is the smell. It creeps into the dining room just as breakfast is being served. A sour, unpleasant tang that undercuts the usual sense of toast and jam and overboiled eggs. Your father sniffs, frowns, and mutters something about the drains. Your mother, never one to be outdone by infrastructure, waves it off with, "It's likely just the gardener composting too close to the kitchen." She says it as if the problem is the gardener's proximity, not the fact that there may be raw sewage blooming somewhere beneath your floorboards. You push your plate away. Suddenly the boiled egg looks less like food and more like a warning. By lunchtime, the servants are whispering. Not the usual kitchen gossip about someone's unfortunate hemline or the price of butter. These whispers are sharp, urgent. You catch Mary coming back from the scullery with a tight face and sleeves rolled higher than usual. "Don't drink the water," she mutters as she passes you in the hall, and you stop. "What?" She pauses, lowers her voice. Cook's girl is ill, sweating and shaking like a tree in a storm, and the water's cloudy. You glance out the hallway window. It's rained all week. The gutters are overflowing, the ditches are thick with mud and runoff, and that stream behind the kitchen garden, the one the laundry maid always complains about, it's running higher than it should be. You suddenly remember something you read in one of those banned pamphlets. Cholera doesn't care about etiquette. It comes for the rich just like the poor if the water's bad enough. You skip tea. Not that anyone notices. Your absence is blamed on a delicate turn, which is Victorian for "she might be thinking again." You spend the afternoon in your room, writing nervously in your journal, and eyeing the wash basin like it might bite you. Mary enters with a jug of water and you stare at it like it's full of arsenic. "Is it boiled?" you ask. She raises an eyebrow. "Of course." "I'm not trying to kill you." You nod. Still, you don't drink it. That evening, the first confirmed case is announced. It's not a servant, not yet. It's a neighbour, a tradesman's wife, dead within hours of symptoms. Your mother reads the notice aloud as if the woman in question is already a footnote. "It's always worse in the lower streets," she says, sipping her tea with a dainty hand. "Too many children, not enough sanitation." You glance at her cup and wonder if the irony is floating in it. Your father orders the servants to start boiling all household water as a precaution, but still insists the family needn't worry. "We are not," he reminds you, "the sort of people who get cholera. You are, however, the sort of people who eat soup someone else prepared in a kitchen that shares its water supply with the servants' quarters. So, you go to bed with a dry mouth and a sick feeling that has nothing to do with illness and everything to do with how fragile all of this is. The gowns, the silverware, the pretense of safety. 3 more deaths by the end of the week, all nearby, all poor. And yet, the household continues as if nothing is happening. The drawing room is still dusted, the parlour curtains are still drawn back every morning. Mr. Elcombe even comes to call, bringing a bouquet of peonies and a tin of biscuits that looks suspiciously damp. He notices your lack of appetite and tries to make light of it. "Afraid of your mother's scones?" "No," you say. "Afraid of waterborne disease and social collapse." He blinks. "Ah." You try to explain the symptoms you've been reading about. Vomiting, muscle cramps, skin turning blue from dehydration. You talk about shared wells and overflowing gutters and the dead rats they pulled from the cellar in town. He shifts uncomfortably. "That's rather morbid." "It's reality," you reply. He's quiet for a moment, then says, "Do you want to come riding tomorrow?" You stare at him. "Is that your idea of disaster preparedness?" He smiles weakly. "More like distraction." You decline. That night, Harriet slips into your room with a candle and a flask she definitely stole from your father's study. She offers you a sip. You hesitate. "Rum?" she says. Safer than tea. You drink. She sits beside you on the edge of your bed, legs tucked under her in that slightly unladylike way that reminds you why she's the only person here who doesn't make you feel insane. You're scared, she says after a while. I'm angry, you say, and maybe also scared. She nods. I was here during the last outbreak. Half the village died. They buried some of them without coffins. You look at her. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because no one wants to admit we're all one bad drainage pipe away from equality. Historical fact. Victorian England suffered multiple cholera epidemics throughout the 19th century. The disease was waterborne, but due to prevailing theories about miasma, most people blamed bad air rather than contaminated water. It wasn't until 1854, with the work of physician John Snow, that the real cause was widely recognised. Fringe fact? During cholera outbreaks, upper-class households sometimes perfumed their halls with vinegar and lavender in a futile attempt to ward off the disease. Some even stuffed herbs into their corsets, which is both poetic and pointless. And the scholarly debate. There's still discussion among historians about how class played into Victorian public health. Were the rich genuinely ignorant, or did they willfully ignore the suffering of the poor until it spilled into their parlours? The answer, as usual, lies somewhere in the filth between. That night you boil your own water. You ignore Mary's questions and pour it into a teacup that still smells faintly of Earl Grey. You drink slowly, the steam curling into your face, and think about death. Not in a dramatic way, in a practical one. If it comes, quiet, sudden, ugly, you wonder how it will be recorded. If at all, a line in a parish registry, a small funeral, a dress passed on to a cousin, a journal tucked into a drawer and forgotten. But if you live, then maybe it's time to do something more than just survive. You pick up your pen and write, I do not want to die in a dress I didn't choose, in a house I didn't build, with nothing to my name but patience and propriety. If death doesn't care who I am, then neither should life. The invitation is shaped like a threat. Stiff cardstock, gold filigree, wax seal, pressed so deeply it might bruise your fingers. It's for the autumn harvest ball, the crown jewel of the local social calendar, and depending on whom you ask, either a glittering rite of passage or a formal declaration of defeat. For spinsters like you, it's less a party and more a review of your expiration date. Your mother clutches the invitation with a reverent sigh. Finally, she says, a proper opportunity. To what, you ask, already knowing the answer. To finish what Mr. Elcombe started, of course. Ah, yes, that old chestnut. Nothing says romance like a waltz sandwiched between cold beef slices and social panic. You murmur something non-committal, and she doesn't notice. She's too busy outlining your entire week in exhausting detail, dress fittings, hair trials, glove selection, shoe repairs, consultation with the milliner, who apparently has just the ribbon to elevate your face, and practicing the quadrille so you don't disgrace yourself by confusing a chassé with a poker. You've been to the harvest ball before. Last year you were a polite ghost. You remember the punch, vaguely alcoholic and wildly oversweet. The way the lights caught on the crystal chandeliers and the perfume of so many desperate women clinging to their social worth like it's stitched into their hemline. You remember dancing once with a man who mistook you for your cousin and complimented your eyes, which he referred to as hazel. They're not. They're grey. This year you're determined to be different. But different how exactly? You don't know yet. All you know is that you've had enough of being paraded like livestock wrapped in taffeta. At your first fitting, the seamstress sighs heavily when she sees you. We'll need to do something about the waist. You smile sweetly. Which one? My natural one or the one society insists I fake? She doesn't laugh. You stand in place for nearly 2 hours while women pin, tug, measure and mutter. Mary hovers in the corner, arms folded, clearly trying not to interfere, but also clearly judging the entire process. You want to ask her what she would wear to a ball, but that's the kind of question that opens doors you're not allowed to open. The dress is gold. Not bright gold. Subdued, like honey under candlelight. The bodice is tight enough to prevent sin and possibly also breathing. The sleeves puff slightly at the shoulder in a way that implies you're both fashionable and willing to suffer for it. When it's done, you look at yourself in the mirror and feel undecided. You look like a heroine in a novel you wouldn't want to read. Back home, Harriet watches you try it on again. She squints. You look expensive. That's the goal, isn't it? She grins. What are you going to do in it? That's the question. Because this time, you don't want to just float across the dance floor like a glorified centerpiece. You want to feel something, say something, be someone. So you start preparing the only way you know how, by writing. You draft a speech. Not one you'll actually give out loud, God forbid, but something to remind yourself who you are underneath the corset. You write it in your journal, then fold the page and tuck it into your pocket on the night of the ball. I am not here to be chosen. I am not fruit on a tree. I am not an auction. I am not a promise or a burden or a sigh. I am a woman who woke up in this dress and decided to stay awake. The night of the ball arrives under a clear October sky, sharp with cold and stars. The manor house is lit up like a wedding cake, tiers of golden light, flickering windows, and an entrance lined with lanterns that flicker as if alive. The carriage jolts you to attention as it stops. Your mother sighs in satisfaction. "Stand tall," she says, smile modestly. You step into the ballroom and immediately feel the weight of 100 eyes. You're assessed, catalogued, placed. It happens so fast it's like being pickpocketed of your self-worth. The music swells, a gentle waltz, too elegant for the tension it tries to hide. You move through the crowd, nodding, curtsying, smiling. Miss Eliza Hartnell is there, of course, in periwinkle silk and the kind of posture that suggests she's been rehearsing her engagement smile in the mirror. Lady Effington nods at you like a wary schoolmistress. Even Miss Grange, fresh from whatever finishing school manufactures unicorns, lifts her fan slightly in greeting. Then you see him, Mr. Elcombe, standing near the refreshment table, nervously adjusting his cufflinks, speaking too softly to a man with a jawline and no apparent personality. He spots you. His face lights up, not dramatically but genuinely, in that soft, startled way that makes your heart hiccup. He makes his way over. "You look," he begins, then fumbles. "Lovely." "Lovely," you repeat. "What an original sentiment." He laughs awkwardly. Sorry. You do. It's just hard to say it right. You glance at the dance floor. Are you going to ask? "Would you like to?" "I would." And just like that, you're dancing, and it's not perfect. He steps on your toe once, and you nearly collide with a tray of pastries. But he's warm and steady, and when the music slows, he actually listens. Not just to the violins or your breath, but to you. He leans in slightly. "I read what you gave me. The pamphlet." You stiffen. "You weren't meant to. It fell out of your journal. I was curious." "And?" He smiles. "I liked it. It was honest." You study him. "And you're not horrified?" "I'm English," he says. "We're very good at pretending not to be horrified." You laugh. The dance ends. You don't let go of his hand immediately. Historical fact. Balls were essential parts of courtship in the Victorian era, often orchestrated like military campaigns with dance cards, seating arrangements, and timed refreshments. But women still had to wait to be asked. Movement, like choice, was not theirs to initiate. Fringe fact: some women wrote fake dance cards to appear more desirable, filling in the names of fictional admirers to ward off pity or judgment. And the scholarly debate? There's an ongoing argument about whether Victorian balls were empowering, giving women rare public presence, or oppressive, boxing them into beauty and availability. For most, it was probably both. A gilded cage that occasionally doubled as a window. As the evening winds down, you and Mr. Elcombe step outside to breathe. The garden is dark, the air crisp. The music floats through the walls behind you. You turn to him. "Would you still want me?" you ask. "If I said I might never be what they want me to be?" He looks at you for a long moment. "I don't think I want you because of them," he says. You reach into your pocket and hand him the folded note from your journal, the one you wrote before the ball. "Read it later," you say. Then you step back inside the ballroom alone. You're still wearing the corset, still smiling, still polite. But under it all there's something new, a sense that maybe, just maybe, you've started to become the person you were always supposed to be. There's something about a ballroom the morning after that feels almost haunted. The chandeliers are still, the floor is scuffed, and the smell of perfume has curdled slightly into something closer to effort and embarrassment. You return the next day to retrieve a misplaced glove, ivory, silk, left under a chair like a quiet surrender. And as you walk through the echoing space, it feels like trespassing in your own memory. Last night feels both vivid and distant. You danced, you laughed. You handed Mr. Elcombe a piece of yourself in the form of folded paper, and then you walked away. Not dramatically. No violins, no storming exits. but with enough quiet resolve that it felt like a chapter closing. Now the music is gone, and the silence feels instructional. You find the glove, limp and a little soiled, and tuck it into your coat pocket. The moment's broken by a voice from the far end of the room. "I thought I'd find you here." You turn. It's Mr. Elcombe, of course. He's not in formal wear this time. No gloves, no cravat, no lingering smell of hair pomade. Just a dark coat and an uncertain expression. You try to smile. "Did you read it?" He nods. "Twice." You wait. "I didn't understand all of it," he admits, "but I think I understood enough." "Enough to run?" He frowns. "Run where?" You shrug. "Away. Most men do when women stop pretending." He shakes his head. "I don't want to run. I just want to know what happens next." That's the most honest thing either of you has said in weeks. You walk slowly toward the windows where the morning sun is slanting through the glass, catching the dust in the air like floating stars. He follows, but keeps his distance. "I don't know what happens next," you say. "Can I be part of it?" he asks. You turn to look at him. He's not smiling now. He's serious in a way that doesn't ask for applause. "I don't want a wife who's been trained to obey," he says. "I want someone who might argue with me, challenge me, say impossible things." You raise an eyebrow. "Well, you've got the impossible part right." He chuckles. "And I'm willing to wait." If that means anything. It does. It means everything. But still, you're not ready to hand your name over like a signed contract. Instead, you offer him your glove. "Here," you say. "You forgot this." He takes it, presses it to his chest with mock reverence. "An omen," he says. "Or just laundry," you reply. The next week is a strange, suspended thing. You don't see him. Not because he's avoiding you. He sends a letter, short and cautious, thanking you for your honesty and your mind, but because you need space, to think, to breathe, to exist outside the corset of social expectation. You spend your days in small rebellions. You walk without gloves. You read poetry not meant for ladies. You sneak into the garden barefoot once just to see how it feels. Cold, damp, a little reckless, delicious. One afternoon you sit in the drawing room with your mother, pretending to embroider while she reads aloud from a society paper. Her voice drones on until she pauses with a sharp intake of breath. "Oh," she says, "listen to this." A surprising stir at the harvest ball, Mr. Beyond, seen dancing not once but thrice with the same gentleman, and departing the floor without an escort. You don't flinch. She narrows her eyes. "You're becoming a subject. Of gossip? Of attention? Is there a difference?" She closes the paper with a snap. You'd do well to stop drawing it. You look at her for a long moment. Or maybe they'd do well to stop watching. She blinks, clearly unsure whether to be impressed or appalled. You don't wait to find out. That night, you journal. "I'm not sure what I want yet, but I'm certain of what I don't. I don't want to spend my life performing. I don't want to enter rooms like a servant and leave like a ghost. I don't want to be known for the quality of my hem-stitching or the angle of my smile. I want to be remembered because I said something no one else dared to, even if I had to whisper it." The week ends with another letter. This one from your great-aunt Belinda, who has apparently heard rumours of your increasing individuality. She invites you for tea. Your mother groans. Why does that old woman insist on writing in riddles? You don't say it aloud, but you suspect your great-aunt might be the only one in the family who understands you. You accept the invitation immediately. But before the visit, there's still one more ghost to exorcise, the ballroom. You return again, alone, after hours. The caretaker lets you in with a shrug. He's used to rich people doing strange things. You walk the floor once more. The space is quiet, echoes soft. You step into the centre, close your eyes, and turn slowly, as if the memory of the music might pull you into one last dance. Then you curtsy, not to a man, to yourself. Historical fact. In the 19th century, dance etiquette was tightly regulated. Unaccompanied dancing or excessive familiarity could stain a woman's reputation. But within the rules, women often formed coded alliances using dances to signal affection, rejection, or resistance. Fringe fact. Some women kept private dance journals, not just for recording partners, but for sketching dress ideas, writing gossip, or venting frustrations. One diary, found in a London attic, included a drawing of a lady kicking over a punch bowl labelled marriage. And the scholarly debate? Was the ballroom a space of female oppression, or a secret stage for agency? Scholars argue both. What's clearer is that many women used it not just to be admired, but to experiment with power, timing, and consequence. As you leave the ballroom for the last time, you pass the empty music stand and whisper, just under your breath, "I'll write my own waltz next time." And for the first time in a long while, you feel ready for what's next. It starts as a whisper in the wall, a soft rhythmic creaking from the servants' wing, too consistent to be rats, too human to be plumbing. At first, you ignore it. Victorian houses make noises, old beams groan, pipes gurgle, wood settles like a tired man in a stiff chair. But then you hear it again. Later, louder, a tapping, a shuffle, the unmistakable drag of footsteps where there should be none. You sit up in bed, sheets tangled around your legs like the aftermath of a small genteel storm. The candle on your bedside table flickers wildly, as if trying to warn you. It's not quite midnight, which feels suspiciously like the most haunted time of night. You tell yourself to go back to sleep. You try, but the sound comes again, closer this time. You rise. Mary's asleep in the servants' attic tonight, on account of household budget realignments, a phrase your mother uses to mean she's costing too much for a girl with opinions. So there's no one to ask, no one to tell you to stop behaving like a gothic heroine with too much free time and a head full of pamphlets. You light your candle, wrap yourself in your dressing gown, and slip into the hallway. The air is cold. The house feels altered, emptier somehow, like someone's removed a wall and put it back slightly wrong. You follow the noise to the narrow staircase that leads to the east wing, the portion of the house the family stopped using sometime after the great paint-peeling incident of 1837. It's where old furniture goes to die, and where servants sleep if they're lucky, or being punished. Your candle flickers. Your shadow stretches grotesquely ahead of you, flicking and bowing across the faded wallpaper. You pass dusty portraits whose eyes seem to shift slightly as you walk by. The floorboards whine under your feet like dogs left out in the rain. Then, just past the linen closet, you see it. A light. Soft flickering. Definitely not gas. It's coming from beneath a door that should not be open. You approach. Slowly. Carefully. Like someone entering a dream they're not supposed to remember. Inside the room. Not ghosts. Not demons. Not a cursed governess with a vendetta. It's 3 women, all seated in a half circle on overturned crates and footstools. One is sewing, one is reading aloud from a tiny battered book. The third, facing you, is Mary. She doesn't scream, she doesn't even flinch. She just looks up and says, "Well, I suppose it was only a matter of time." You blink. "What? Is this?" "The library," she says dryly, "the real one." You step into the room. There are no shelves, no official titles, no cataloguing system, just piles of paper, pamphlets, newsletters, ink-smeared pages and yellowed scraps tucked between recipe books and manuals for laundry starching. You spot at least one edition of A Vindication of the Rights of Woman with the corner singed. There's a small wooden box marked "Confiscated" and a stack of notes written in what looks like Harriet's handwriting. The girl reading aloud, brunette, scowl fixed firmly in place, lowers her book. Is she a sympathizer or a snitch? Mary shrugs. "Let's find out." You raise both hands. "I'm not here to ruin anything." The third woman, older, points a knitting needle at you. "That remains to be seen." "I'm curious," you say. "That's all." Mary gestures to an empty stool, "Then sit down and shut up." You do. They resume. The reading continues. This one's a collection of personal essays by women who have left their households, willingly or not. One was disinherited. Another ran off to a boarding house and now writes speeches in Edinburgh. A third is raising 3 children on her own after refusing to remarry. Each story is defiant, messy, and stubbornly alive. When the reading ends, the discussion begins. It's not polite, it's passionate. There's arguing, questioning, outright swearing. "Obedience is not safety," one woman says. "It's camouflage." "But don't we still need it," Mary argues, "until we can afford not to?" "That's the trap," the older one shoots back. "Waiting until it's safe is how they keep us quiet." You sit quietly, soaking it all in like a thirsty plant. You thought you were rebellious for writing in your journal and drinking unboiled rum. But this is different. It's organised. It's angry. It's real. Mary turns to you at last. "Well," she asks, "are you in?" You hesitate. "What is this exactly?" "The sewing circle," she says. "For the people who stopped pretending we're not suffocating." You nod, slowly. "I think I've been suffocating too." The older woman smiles. That's how we all got here. They hand you a small pamphlet, handwritten, barely legible, but dense with ideas. At the top, scrawled in ink, "The Society for the Mutual Liberation of Spinster, Servant and Sinner." You burst out laughing. "That's the name?" Mary smirks. It was either that or the Ladies' League of mildly controlled rage. You tuck the paper into your pocket like a relic. "Do we meet often?" "Every week," the brunette says, "unless someone's caught or coughing blood. Then we reschedule." Historical fact. Underground women's circles did exist in the Victorian era, often under the guise of sewing groups, book clubs, or religious study. These meetings created safe spaces to discuss taboo subjects: education, reproductive rights, labour conditions, and political reform. Fringe fact? Some of these secret societies had code names, passwords, and informal ranks, an echo of the revolutionary groups men were forming around the same time. The women just hid theirs behind lace and lemon tarts. And the scholarly debate? Some historians see these circles as proto-feminist movements, vital to the eventual suffrage campaign. Others argue their impact was limited, constrained by class divisions and secrecy. Still, for many women, they were a first taste of resistance and community. You return to your room before sunrise, your feet cold, your mind hot. You hide the pamphlet beneath your pillow, beside your journal, and for the first time in weeks, you sleep without dreaming of corsets, weddings, or disease. Just women, in a room, making plans. The key is stolen, not borrowed, not accidentally found. Stolen. It happens on a quiet Wednesday morning while your mother is distracted rearranging the tea roses in the hallway vase, muttering about the proper symbolism of floral arrangements as if forget-me-nots are capable of social sabotage. You drift past her in your most innocent dress and make your way to the study, where the key to the locked library cabinet is tucked, as always, in the third drawer under a pile of maps no one has looked at since Napoleon was relevant. You find it without trouble, heavy, brass, warm from the sunlight streaming through the window. Your fingers close around it like it's a relic, and maybe it is, the doorway to forbidden things. 10 minutes later, you're alone in the library. The cabinet creaks as it opens, like it knows you don't belong here. Inside are shelves lined with books that have been deemed too fragile, or too important for general use. Code for things women shouldn't be reading. Your father keeps them locked away the same way society locks away opinions that don't flatter the status quo. You run your fingers along the spines: Pliny the Elder, Machiavelli, Voltaire. Then, nestled between the Spectator and a crumbling edition of Parliamentary Procedures for the Respectable Gentleman, you find it. A title that shouldn't be here, and definitely shouldn't be bound in red leather with no author name. The Dangerous Mind of the Educated Woman. You smile like someone finding dynamite under a pillow. You take it, you close the cabinet, you return the key, and by supper, the book is under your mattress, wrapped in a plain kerchief like contraband tea. That night you read. It's dense. It's brilliant. It's the kind of writing that doesn't ask permission to be heard. The author, who signs only as M, writes in scathing, elegant prose about the invisible shackles around women's ankles, the way knowledge is rationed like wartime sugar, the way even grammar becomes a weapon in the hands of men. One line sticks in your head for hours. A woman who reads is a threat. A woman who understands what she reads is an uprising. By the third chapter, you're sweating. Not because the room is warm, but because something is waking up inside you, and it isn't polite. It isn't delicate. It isn't the version of yourself your mother wants to parade around in a modest collar and sensible boots. It's the you who asked questions, who spoke Latin and caused offence, who started to feel the corset not just as fabric, but as metaphor. You close the book just before dawn, your eyes raw, your heart electric, and then you do something strange. You write a letter. Not to Mr. Elcombe, not to your mother, not to Harriet or even Mary. You write to M. It begins, "I don't know who you are, but I think you might know me. I found your book. I didn't mean to. But it meant something to me anyway. I thought I was alone in this house. Now I think you've been here all along. You don't know where to send it, so you hide it behind the loose brick in your bedroom wall, the one where you've started keeping little treasures, a pressed fern, a broken brooch, a snipped ribbon from the ball. A quiet rebellion, catalogued in secret. The next day, something shifts. You begin noticing things. The housemaid humming a revolutionary tune under her breath while dusting. A new pamphlet tucked behind the cook's apron strings. Mary reading something by candlelight that she quickly hides when you enter the room. You're not imagining it. The house isn't just haunted by its furniture or its traditions. It's vibrating with hidden life. There are layers under layers, secret lives growing like moss in the corners. One afternoon, during an errand to fetch spare linens, you pass through the servants' wing again. A door is ajar. Inside, a maid sits writing. Not cleaning, not stitching, but writing. With the furrowed brow of someone translating pain into poetry. She sees you. You don't speak. She doesn't panic. She just nods. That's all it takes. A nod. You're one of them now. That evening you return to the secret library in the East Wing. You bring the dangerous mind of the educated woman and place it gently on the central crate, surrounded by other treasures. A candle burns low. The air smells like ink and heat and female defiance. Mary arrives late. She sees the book, raises an eyebrow. You found it. You nod. She was one of us, Mary says. Years ago. Who? M, she says. Your great-aunt Belinda. You blink. The one I'm having tea with tomorrow? Mary nods. Ask her what she burned in 1848. You stare at the book. She wrote this? She started it, Mary says. We've been adding ever since. Your hands tremble slightly. Not from fear, but from proximity to something ancient and alive. That night you write. There's a whole world beneath the world they show us. It has its own books, its own rules, its own secret passwords, and its own courage. I thought I was alone. I'm not. I thought they were the ones with power. They're not. Historical fact. Many Victorian women who were denied formal education created informal networks of intellectual exchange. Books were passed hand to hand, and secret reading circles flourished in attics, sculleries, and even laundry rooms. Fringe fact. Some of these women annotated books for future readers, leaving behind marginalia, tiny handwritten notes that turned each volume into a conversation across generations. Scholars have found entire arguments scrawled in the margins of Paradise Lost. And the scholarly debate, were these underground literary movements widespread or rare exceptions? The truth is obscured by time and secrecy. But what's undeniable is that where access was denied, women carved their own doors. The next morning you wake up with ink on your fingers and a book in your hands, and for the first time you don't feel like a girl playing dress-up in a world that doesn't fit. You feel like the author of something entirely new. You never thought you'd hear the word hysteria used in a sentence that didn't involve a doctor, a couch, or something you said that made a man uncomfortable. But here it is, floating casually out of Aunt Belinda's mouth like steam from a teacup. You're sitting in her sunroom, surrounded by creeping ivy, ancestral clutter, and the strong, almost medicinal scent of bergamot. There's a lace doily under everything, including, bafflingly, the sugar bowl, and she's already on her second cup when she drops the bomb. They said I was hysterical, she says, stirring with a small clink, for burning the marriage contract. You blink, mid-sip. You burned it? In the hearth, she replies, as if she's describing a scone recipe. In front of the solicitor, the would-be groom, and my mother, may her soul stay as cold as her pearls. You lower your cup, suddenly very aware that you're not here to eat cake. You're here for a reckoning. I was told you were eccentric, you say carefully. Belinda snorts. Darling, eccentric is what they call a woman who refuses to be humiliated quietly. You've always known there was something off-script about her. She lives alone, for one, unmarried, unapologetically wealthy, and fond of saying things like, well, he had a lovely jawline, but not much else going on behind it. Your mother calls her difficult. Your father calls her expensive. You've always called her fascinating. She leans forward now, bony hands folded over her knee, eyes sharp as needles. Your mother told me you've been reading. Depends who's asking. I'm not asking, she says. I'm remembering. She reaches beneath the table and pulls out a small battered wooden box. Inside, letters, scraps of paper, bits of ribbon, and at the very bottom, the unmistakable red leather of the dangerous mind of the educated woman. You nearly choke. I just found that, she smiles. Of course you did. We leave it for those who need it. So you really wrote it, she shrugs. Some of it. The bones, anyway. Others added more over time. Mary wrote the bit about corsets. Harriet contributed a brilliant rant on punch bowls and forced femininity. Even the maid with the lazy eye, bless her, left a poem tucked in the back about menstruation and moonlight. You gape. This entire house is full of revolutionaries. Oh, darling, Belinda says, every house is. There's a long pause. So what happened after you burned the contract? She sips her tea. He left. My mother wept. The solicitor returned with a new bride-to-be a month later, and the world kept turning. But I didn't marry. I built this house, I bought this furniture, and I learned to live without anyone deciding what I should wear or when I should smile. But weren't you afraid? She shrugs again. Of course I was. I still am. Every day. But I'd rather be afraid and free than comfortable and caged. You look down at your own hands resting in your lap and think of all the things you've been afraid of. Spinsterhood, disgrace, bad water, whispered gossip, soft refusals. All of it seems smaller now. She watches you for a moment, then says, "They'll never hand us power. You know that, right?" "I'm starting to. That's why we take it where we can," she continues. "In the drawing rooms, in the libraries, in the dark places, and sometimes," she leans forward, lowering her voice, "in scandal." You raise an eyebrow. "Scandal?" "Oh yes," she grins. "My favourite method." You spend the rest of the afternoon going through the box with her, reading letters written in furious script, some unsigned, others with names you recognise. Women from every station, titled ladies, maids, governesses, even one midwife who once delivered a duke's illegitimate child and then disappeared into a boarding house with a baby and a pistol. "We called ourselves the Daughters of the Drawer," Belinda says, lifting the false bottom of the box to reveal yet more pages, "because we always kept our words hidden. But you didn't stop writing. Of course not. Because someday someone like you would come along, you swallow, and what if I mess it up?" "You will," she says. "We all do. But the point isn't to be perfect, it's to be awake. There's silence between you, heavy but not uncomfortable, the kind that sits like a warm shawl over both your shoulders." Then she says, "So, what are you going to do next?" You don't answer right away. You're too busy imagining the possibilities. Later that evening, back in your own room, you pull the loose brick aside again. You place a new page in your journal, and for the first time you sign your name not just with your initials, but with the kind of flourish reserved for declarations. "I will not be reduced to patience. I will not be measured in teacups or judged by my stitch length. I have seen the map beneath the wallpaper. I know the way out. I will not go quietly. Historical fact." Victorian women were frequently diagnosed with hysteria for acts of rebellion, sexual autonomy, or even just strong opinions. Treatments range from bed rest to institutionalization. Some women use the diagnosis strategically to gain solitude or avoid unwanted marriages. Fringe fact: some so-called hysterics were in fact writers, thinkers, or proto-activists. Their letters and journals, long dismissed as symptoms, have become key documents in feminist historical study. And the scholarly debate? There's ongoing conversation about whether early female eccentrics were punished rebels or empowered outliers. Perhaps, as Belinda shows, they were both. Survivors of a system rigged to break them, who chose instead to light it on fire. You stare at your own handwriting for a long while, then tuck the page behind the brick and replace it. Tomorrow, you think, something will begin. You don't know what yet, but you know it will be yours. There's no warning, no omens in the tea leaves, no shift in the wind. Just a soft knock at the drawing room door on a perfectly average afternoon, and your mother standing, with both hope and calculation bleeding through her voice, saying, "It's him." You already know who she means. Mr. Elcombe. Of course it's Mr. Elcombe. The visit is unexpected, which means it's serious. Visits only become surprises when men intend to propose or confess to embezzlement, and considering he's not sweating through his hat this time, it's almost certainly the former. You stare at the doorway like it might close on its own. "Shall I show him in?" your mother asks, her eyes gleaming in that way that makes you feel both like a prize heifer and a traitor to your own spine. You nod, numb. He enters with awkward grace, holding his hat in one hand, the other fiddling with a small velvet box in his coat pocket, as if it's hot to the touch. His waistcoat is immaculate, his face is hopeful, and his voice when he speaks is entirely too gentle for what's coming. "May I have a moment alone?" Your mother beams and evaporates. The door clicks shut behind her like the final turn of a key. You don't sit, neither does he. For a second, neither of you speak. Then he clears his throat. "I wanted to come in person. I thought it would be better this way." You force a smile. Proposals rarely come by post. He chuckles nervously. "True. Though it would save some embarrassment." He hesitates, then steps forward. "I've thought a lot about what you said at the ball. about not being what others expect, about wanting more. You don't move. And I've read what you gave me. Twice, 3 times actually. You have a thing for radical literature, you ask, eyebrow raised. I have a thing for you, he says, and you flinch. Not because it's unkind, but because it's kind, and that's worse. He reaches into his coat and withdraws the box. Would you? He pauses, corrects himself. Could you ever see yourself? Another pause. Would you like... Please don't, you say softly. He freezes. You step forward and gently take the box from his hand. You don't open it. You're a good man, you say. You're thoughtful. You listen. You let me be strange in public. He half smiles. But I think we both know this isn't what I want. He's silent, not angry, just sad. I thought, he begins, maybe we could build something different. You nod. We could. But then I'd start to shrink again. Not because of you, just because that's what I do when I try to fit into spaces I didn't design. He looks down. So this is the part where I thank you for your honesty? No, you say. This is the part where we both get to leave with our dignity intact. You hand him back the box. He accepts it gently, like it's something fragile that once meant something more. I'll miss you, he says. I hope so, you reply. And then he's gone. The silence afterward is immense. Your mother storms in 3 minutes later, demanding explanations in that sharp, shivering tone reserved for fallen soufflés and family disgrace. You tell her the truth. Not all of it, but enough. I couldn't marry someone just because it's what's expected. She blinks at you like you've spoken in tongues. He would have taken care of you. I can take care of myself. Her mouth flattens into a line so thin it nearly vanishes. She walks out without another word. You collapse into the nearest chair, not from regret, but from relief. Harriet finds you an hour later and flops onto the floor beside you. So, she says, you did it. I did. You turned down a perfectly eligible man. I know, she beams. I'm so proud I might cry. Or drink, or both. You laugh. He was kind. Kind isn't enough. No, you say, not when the cost is yourself. That night you write in your journal, I said no, and the sky didn't fall. My bones didn't break. I didn't vanish into dust. I'm still here. More here, maybe, than I've ever been. Mary brings you tea in the evening and says nothing. Just places the cup down gently, glances at your untouched dinner tray and raises an eyebrow. He asked, she says. You nod. You said no? Yes. She nods again, then says, welcome back, and leaves. The next day, word gets out. You're not sure how, but suddenly the entire town seems to know you turned down a proposal. The reaction is swift, predictable, and entirely theatrical. Mrs. Eliza Hartnell cuts you in the market. Lady Marjorie sends a note of vague disapproval written in perfect copperplate, which you hang on your mirror like a medal. Your mother receives no fewer than 6 letters of concern and 1 gentle offer to send you to a retreat for recentering one's feminine priorities. Your father mutters something about spinsterdom and the perils of Greek education over the newspaper, but you stop listening after the second sigh, and then, amid the gossip and the cold stares, something else happens. 3 days after the proposal you receive a letter. It's unsigned, but the handwriting is unmistakable. M's. You made the right choice. I did too, and it was the beginning of everything. M. You smile, fold the letter, tuck it into the brick with the others. Historical fact. Victorian women who declined marriage proposals were often ostracised, or pitied. Being unmarried by a certain age carried social consequences, and spinster wasn't just a status. It was a stigma. Fringe fact? Some women who rejected suitors went on to form Boston marriages, partnerships with other women for companionship, support and freedom, though not always romantic. These relationships, often hidden in plain sight, were quietly subversive. And the scholarly debate? There's ongoing discourse about whether refusing marriage was an act of independence or isolation. For many it was both, an escape from one kind of prison into the uncertain wilderness of selfhood. You close your journal with a soft thud, and for the first time you feel no need to apologise for choosing yourself. You've been watching the cracks in the ceiling for an hour when the knock comes. Not the polite kind. Not the kind that says visiting hours or do come in for tea. No, this knock is coded. 2 quick raps, a pause, then 1 slow drag, more scrape than tap. You sit up instantly. You recognise the pattern. Mary told you once, half joking, that this was the summons. You thought she was being dramatic. You should have known better. You rise from bed, still half-dressed from the long, dull dinner your mother insisted on hosting, despite the scandal still warming your seat at the village gossip table. Harriet had called it a strategic reassertion of virtue. You called it a waste of pudding. The hallway is dark, everyone asleep, or pretending to be. You tiptoe past the ancestral portraits with their disapproving eyes, and through the second corridor toward the east wing. The air grows cooler there, the carpet thinner, the scent of lavender replaced by candle wax and ink. When you reach the old sewing room, now unofficially the headquarters of the least recognised revolution in the county, it's already half full. 8 women, all ages, all ranks. A lady's maid sits beside a merchant's widow. Harriet's here, of course, hair pinned up like a crown of sarcasm. Mary is by the window, arms folded. And in the centre, standing like a general before a council, is Belinda. She raises an eyebrow when she sees you. "About time," you blink. "I wasn't late." "No," she replies, "but you're ready." Someone closes the door. The lock clicks. A lantern is lit and passed behind a thin cloth to muffle the glow. It casts the room in warm, secret gold. Around the circle, faces look tired but determined. Belinda doesn't waste time. "We have a problem," she says, pulling a folded newspaper from her coat and laying it flat on the table. The headline is small, barely noticeable, tucked beneath a wedding announcement and a shipping report. But you see it. Local printing house fined for indecent materials. 1 employee arrested. Mary curses under her breath. Harriet's jaw tightens. "Which printing house?" "The one on Lantern Lane," Belinda replies. "They printed our last run." You swallow. "Of the pamphlets?" Mary nods grimly. "They caught someone with a stack of them." He talked. A wave of unease shivers through the room. Belinda raises her hand. No names were mentioned, but it's only a matter of time. If they trace it back to us, even indirectly. "What happens?" you ask, though you already know. "Prison, maybe," Harriet says, "or worse, depending on who gets dragged into it." Your mind spins. You think of the cabinet in the library, the red book, the letters under your brick, the whispers in this very room. And then you say, before you even mean to, "So we need to go deeper underground." Every head turns toward you. You take a breath. "We need new names, a new press, a new distribution method, something they won't see coming." Mary crosses her arms, half amused. "And how do you suggest we do that?" You sit straighter. "We use the drawing rooms." There's a pause. Harriet cackles softly. "You want to smuggle sedition through tea service?" "Exactly," you say. "No one suspects polite society. The better behaved we look, the more dangerous we can be. We hide it in recipe cards, book club notes, embroidery samplers." Belinda grins, wide and wicked. "A secret society of spinsters and spoon-fed saboteurs? I love it." The others start to nod. Ideas bounce across the circle. "What about church newsletters? What about under the labels of jam jars? I know a housemaid in Lord Redley's manor. She's bored senseless and hates him. You watch it bloom. Right there. Resistance in real time. Not loud, not bloody, but methodical, quiet, strategic, dangerous. By the end of the hour you have a plan, a new name, a code phrase. I heard the lavenders late this year. A symbol, a thistle embroidered near the hem. Not obvious, not loud, but consistent. Harriet draws it in the corner of her handkerchief, a tiny thorny blossom. You add one to your own, a stitched secret between you and the dozen others in this room, and whoever else joins you. As the meeting dissolves into whispers and dispersal, Mary walks beside you down the hall. "You realise what this means, don't you?" she says. "That we're in trouble?" She shakes her head. "That we're in history?" You smile. "Only if we win." She pauses at the stair. "You're not who you were when you arrived." "No," you admit. "I'm not even sure who I was then." She nods. "Good." You return to your room and slide the brick aside. You pull out the journal, the pamphlets, the letters. One by one, you copy them, by hand, onto new pages. Carefully, in smaller handwriting, condensed, hidden. You sew the copies into the lining of your coat, one section beneath the hem, one along the inner collar, the last beneath the sleeve. If they come, if they search your things, they won't find your mind. They won't know you carry a manifesto against your skin. You write. They think we're sewing. We are, but not what they imagine. We're stitching resistance into our sleeves, threading fury into our napkins. Our fingers are tired, but not idle. We're making something sharp, and soon it will be ready. Historical fact. Secret female societies in the 19th century often used domestic crafts as covers for activism. Quilts with hidden codes, samplers stitched with double meanings, and gatherings that masqueraded as innocent social calls were used to spread forbidden texts and ideas. Fringe fact. One known suffragist once passed coded political documents inside the lining of her hat and managed to cross 3 counties undetected. When asked why she wore it indoors, she simply replied, "Bad hair day." And the scholarly debate? Some argue these methods were too passive, too easily overlooked, but others see them as acts of brilliance, turning the expectations of femininity into a weapon, making the domestic sphere a launchpad for dissent. You slip the final stitched pamphlet into your sleeve. You don't need applause, or headlines, or permission. You have thread, ink, and fire. That will be enough. It begins, like most disasters in polite society, with a spoon dropped on the floor. You're at Lady Fawn's monthly, morally uplifting luncheon, a ghastly affair with weak consommé and strong opinions, when it happens. Someone fumbles the silver, a clatter echoes off the marble floor, and in the stiff silence that follows you hear it, clear as a bell. Harriet across the table, turning to the woman beside her and saying, "I heard the lavender's late this year." There's a beat. Then the woman, a quiet, severe-looking widow with a shawl the colour of dead pigeons, nods. Quite late. But they say the thistle's early. You try not to choke on your soup, the code phrase, the callback, in public, at a table surrounded by women who have entire nervous collapses if someone mentions pants. You glance at Harriet. She's sipping her tea like nothing happened, but her eyes flick to you for just a second, just long enough to confirm, yes, this is happening. And then, of course, it spirals. By the time the rhubarb tarts arrive, someone's passed a folded scrap of paper beneath the lace tablecloth. Someone else has dropped a handkerchief embroidered with a tiny purple thistle. You can't move for all the signals. It's like watching birdsong translated into silk and subtlety. You try to remain calm, smiling when expected, nodding at Lady Fawn's story about her nephew's unfortunate encounter with a French biscuit. But beneath the table, you're gripping the note in your lap like it's made of flame. Later in the powder room, one of those gilded little chambers where nothing useful ever happens, you finally unfold it. 3 lines, tiny script, no signature. The paper will run it, tomorrow. Don't blink. You fold it back up and press it into the hidden pocket in your petticoat, the one you stitched yourself last week with your fingers still sore from copying lines of sedition by candlelight. That night no one sleeps. You, Harriet, Mary, Belinda. Everyone's either pacing, drinking, or both. At some point someone boils water just for the symbolism. You sit in your room with the lamp dimmed low and a blanket over the window to muffle the glow, hands trembling as you write in your journal. It's coming. The thing we whispered about. The thing we planned for, the moment where something either ignites or falls apart. You don't know what the paper will say. You've submitted pieces before, under various aliases with careful detours through sympathetic typesetters. But this one is bolder. This one names things. This one includes a list of families that have quietly dismissed women for learning to read. This one quotes your great-aunt Belinda's marriage-burning speech nearly word for word. This one is the point of no return. At breakfast, your father is reading the paper. You try not to stare. You butter your toast. You nod at your mother's update on the vicar's gout. You sip your tea like it isn't boiling your insides. Then he turns the page. A pause. The paper rustles. Another pause. Then sharply, "Good Lord." You look up, slow, innocent. "What is it?" your mother asks. He blinks at the article. "Some nonsense." She sighs. "More women's drama?" "Worse," he mutters. "It's organised." You nearly smile, but you don't, because this isn't the time for triumph. Not yet. Not while he's muttering words like shameful and radical and dangerous. Mary appears at the doorway like smoke. She meets your eye, gives the smallest nod. You excuse yourself from the table, delicately, and walk, not run, to the study. The paper's already there, spread across the desk like a battlefield. There it is. The title in bold, The Spinster's Rebellion, an open letter to the Lords of Power. You scan it. Every line is familiar. Harriet's voice is clear in the sarcasm. Belinda's in the fury. Your own in the closing words. We are not waiting. We are not asking. We're not afraid of your disappointment. We're already free. You're just catching up. By noon, the house is vibrating with whispers. Letters are arriving, neighbours sending word, some furious, some intrigued, some too afraid to say anything at all, which is often the most revealing reaction. Your mother refuses to acknowledge it. She pours tea with a trembling hand and pretends the weather is worth discussing. Your father disappears into his study and sends 3 urgent messages by carriage. You, meanwhile, get dressed. Not in morning black, not in debutante pastels. You wear a stormy grey dress with simple lines and that small thistle embroidered near the hem. It doesn't scream. It hums. It says, "I'm not hiding anymore." You walk to the village, alone, no chaperone, no gloves, no apology. Every step feels like a drumbeat. At the printer's shop, you find Mary waiting, arms crossed, eyes glinting. "They reprinted it," she says, 3 times already." "Anyone arrested?" "No," she says, smirking. "Yet." You glance inside. A new stack of papers waits on the counter. Another woman enters, drops a coin, takes a copy. No words exchanged, just a nod. A mother with 2 children follows her. Then an older man, hunched but curious. Then a young boy. You stay outside watching the line form. No banners, no speeches, just movement. You write later that night. This isn't the revolution they expect. It doesn't shout, it doesn't bleed, it gathers or it circles, it grows in the quiet. And when it's ready, it sings. Historical fact. By the late 19th century, women's rights movements in England were moving from whispers to action. Petitions, protests, and published essays flooded into public discourse, often authored anonymously or under pseudonyms to avoid backlash. Fringe fact. Some radical publications were bound into false covers, sermons, hymnals, even cookbooks, to bypass censorship. Entire print runs vanished in days, handed off in train stations and market stalls. And the scholarly debate, did these writings truly shift public opinion, or were they mostly for the converted? Scholars argue both, but most agree. The public shaming of silence helped make noise louder. You sleep deeply that night for the first time in weeks. The kind of sleep that follows doing something you can't take back, and wouldn't want to. It ends the way these things often do, not with a bang, but a knock at the front door. Not gentle, not neighbourly. It's the kind of knock that brings weather in with it, even on a clear morning. Your mother startles, nearly drops the marmalade spoon. Your father grunts, already bracing himself for some dispute about property, or the latest fire at the stables. But you know. Even before you rise from your chair, you know. You open the door yourself. Behind it stands a man in a crisp wool coat, clipboard in one hand, gloves in the other. Not police. Worse. A magistrate's clerk. He speaks your name, full and formal, and hands you a folded summons. Your mother gasps so loudly it's practically a confession. You read it once, then again. Simple language, politely accusatory. You're to appear at the district hearing house this Thursday next, to answer questions of your alleged role in the publication of indecent and seditious materials, which may be in violation of the Code of Decency and the Harmony of the Realm Act 1857. They found you. Well, not you specifically, not yet, but close enough. And this is how it begins. The system creaks open, just enough to let its boot through the door. You don't cry, you don't scream, you just thank the clerk in a voice so calm it scares even you. You shut the door behind you. In the hallway mirror you catch a glimpse of your face, still, composed, dangerous. You turn to find your mother halfway through a nervous spiral. "I knew this would happen," she says, pacing. "You and your books, your strange little friends, and that awful pin on your collar." "Thistle," you correct. "Don't be clever," she hisses. "You're being summoned like a criminal." "I am a criminal," you reply. "Apparently." Your father appears at the top of the stairs, thunder in his posture. "Is this true?" You hold up the paper. "Would you like to read it?" He does not. You leave them bickering in low, scandalized tones. You go to your room. You don't pack. You don't run. You write. They've finally heard us. The price of speaking was always going to be attention. Let them look. Let them listen. I'm not afraid of being seen anymore. That night, Mary sneaks into your room. No lantern. Just the soft creak of her shoes on the floorboards and the whisper of your name. "They're coming for more of us," she says. 2 others summoned. 1 house searched. "They're scared," you whisper. She nods. "Good." Harriet appears 10 minutes later, holding a bottle of brandy and a stack of letters. Contingency plans, she says. You sit together, shoulder to shoulder, knees pulled up like girls telling ghost stories. But the ghost is real now. The ghost wears wigs and robes and calls itself the Law. Belinda arrives last. She doesn't speak. She just presses a scrap of paper into your palm, closes your fingers around it like a secret handshake. You wait until the others leave, then you unfold it. You're not the first, you will not be the last. Speak clearly, smile rarely, and remember, they fear you because you make sense. The day of the hearing is cold and grey, as if the sky is trying to stay neutral. You wear the grey dress again, the one with the thistle. You don't powder your face, you don't pinch your cheeks pink, you look like yourself. For once that feels like armour. The hearing house is crowded, more than you expected. People pretending they're not here to see you, but failing spectacularly. You walk past them all, head held high, your boots clicking like punctuation. Inside, the magistrate is already seated. He looks like a mouldy sofa. Next to him, a clerk with ink-stained fingers. A constable leans in the doorway, arms crossed, trying to look threatening. Your name is read aloud. You nod. You're asked if you wrote the article. You pause and say clearly, yes. Gasps. Whispered outrage. The magistrate raises one eyebrow so slowly it nearly detaches from his skull. I see, he says. And do you deny its content? No, you say. I wrote what I believe. You admit, he says carefully, to publishing indecent materials under false names. You smile, just a little. I admit to publishing truths under names that wouldn't get me killed. There's a pause. It stretches. Then like a crack, a voice from the back of the gallery speaks up. She's not the only one. You turn. It's a woman. You've never seen her before. Modest dress, eyes like fire. Then another stands. I helped distribute it. Then another. I funded it. One by one, like dominoes made of defiance. Harriet stands. Belinda. Mary. Women from the market. A few men too. Not many, but enough. The room tips. The magistrate blinks rapidly. This is not a forum. But it is, you say. Isn't that what a hearing is? A place to listen? He sputters. You continue. We've heard you our entire lives. Now perhaps you'll return the favour. You're dismissed. Not jailed. Not fined. Not cleared either. A hearing, not a trial. They'll review the matter. You walk out free, but watched. That evening, the newspaper publishes a follow-up. 27 stand behind Spinster's rebellion. The name sticks. You and your friends, the society that grew from dust and thistles in a little red book. You're no longer hidden. You're the thing in the open. Historical fact. The late 1800s saw the beginnings of organised protest by women across England, with increasing public visibility. Court appearances and legal pushback became battlegrounds, as the system attempted to silence growing demands. Fringe fact? Some suffragists who were brought before local courts would smuggle messages into their corsets, prepared for arrest. One famously revealed a stitched banner reading, "I have no master," when unbuttoned for a search. And the scholarly debate? Was this resistance merely symbolic, or did it shift policy? The answer: it forced recognition. Once ignored, voices reach a courtroom. The silence has already cracked. That night you sit by your window and watch the street lamps flicker on. You write one final entry. They tried to call us improper, but we made it a title. They called us disobedient, but we found each other. And now? We've made a sound they can't unhear. Let the others sleep. Let the rules rot. The Spinster's rebellion has only just begun. And so here you are, back in your bed, in your room, in a house that once felt like the centre of everything and now feels smaller, quieter, almost quaint. You're no longer the girl who woke up wondering how to survive a life of cardigans and compromise. You're something else now, something larger than the boundaries of polite society and painfully stitched corsets. You lie under your quilt, the one with the tiny thistle sewn into the corner, and listen to the hum of the evening. No shouts, no trials, just wind through the old oak and the creak of floorboards settling like an old woman into a chair. Peaceful, but not the kind of peace you once dreaded, the numbing kind. This is earned peace. A pause between battles, a breath, not a burial. The house is still full of ghosts, but they no longer scare you. You know their names now. You've read their words. You've added your own. You've joined the line of women who didn't burn themselves down to keep everyone else warm, who chose voice over silence, mess over perfection, thorns over petals. You sit up, light one last candle, write one last letter. Not to Belinda or Harriet or even Mary, but to yourself. To the girl who woke up in the wrong century and decided not to apologise for it. You thought this would be lonely. You were wrong. They were always here, waiting in the quiet, writing in the dark. You are not alone. You're not too much. You're exactly enough. And now you know how to begin. Outside, the world is still doing what it always does, pretending nothing's changed. But inside your mind, and in a dozen other drawing rooms, pantries and parlours across the county, something is smouldering. And someday soon, someone else will knock on a door, step into a dusty room and find a group of women waiting, with thread and books and sharp little smiles, because you woke up as a Victorian spinster, but you went to sleep as a legend.